All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos. And today we have a very interesting sponsored stream. Major shout out to our brother AC. God bless you and the family, AC. Hope you guys are doing well. This is a topic that he actually purchased a couple months ago. So I apologize, AC, for just now getting around to it. But it involved me reading The UFO Deception, an Orthodox Perspective by Father Spyridon Bailey, of which we're going to go over each chapter today. There's essentially 18 chapters, and we're going to be discussing the UFO phenomenon and aliens from an Orthodox perspective. We got a ton of content to get through today. And obviously, Father Spyridon is picking up where Father Seraphim left off. So if you guys aren't familiar, this topic was first addressed, although Father Spyridon goes in much more detail, great detail. And really what this book is doing is providing a paradigmatic critique of sort of the secular modern interpretations of UFOs and aliens. And then really it's not until chapter 17, the chapter just before his conclusion, where he starts to lay out the Orthodox understanding and how some of our church fathers and saints have spoke about the powers, the prince of the powers of the air, which is obviously Satan, Lucifer falling from heaven, and of course the demons. And so that's going to be a topic we're going to be building upon. And I don't have a huge monologue because there's so much I want to get to today that I wanted to start with introducing the major themes of Father Spyridon's book. I was going to provide a quick overview of just the central points that Father Seraphim Rose makes in this book. Again, if you guys haven't read Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, check that out. I had places where I was going to read, but we have so much to get through in this book. So I'm not going to be reading anything from Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future. Go purchase it if you haven't. If you want to learn more about it, again, Father Seraphim dives more into the New Age and Eastern mysticism, all that type of stuff. What Father Spyridon Bailey does in this book is really address, like I said, a paradigmatic critique. And so he begins with actually the UFO sighting that his wife witnessed. And the book begins with the chapter, A Reliable Witness, talking about an event in which his wife saw a UFO in Britain. And he then highlights the newspaper article, which apparently hundreds of people called in that night witnessing the same thing. And so he begins by trying to highlight that the UFO phenomenon is a real phenomenon and people really are seeing things. And then from there, he goes into, let me see here, the chapters, the period of modern sightings. He starts to discuss really from the 20th century forward. So he doesn't get into the ancient aliens, if some of you guys were wanting that. So sorry about that. Oh, shout out to Father Deacon, and God bless you, brother. I saw all the postings of Montana. It looked like you guys had an excellent time out in Montana this year. So glory to God for that. It's great to see Montana thriving. So God bless you, Father Deacon Dr. Ananias. Hope you're well, my man. And tell your wife I said hello and that I miss catching up with her. She's always a fun chat. But anyway, sorry, I digress. I wanted to address some of the chapters that Father Spyridon goes through here. And so the first one is the period of modern sightings. He highlights all these sightings that occur in the 20th century and then goes into military and government responses, then goes into a convenient cover-up, highlighting that the UFO phenomenon is real, but at the same time, after chapter 3, discussing the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, various intelligence agencies in France and Greece and military, all this different stuff. Then he talks about Operation Paperclip, the bringing in of various scientists during World War II, and how this was also, the UFO phenomenon was a convenient cover-up for advanced technology that the government had, not claiming that UFOs are that. Obviously, that's not his argument. The ultimate argument from a Christian Orthodox perspective is that these UFOs, aliens, if you will, are demons. And one of the things that I have highlighted today that we're going to be looking at is all the unique similarities between demonic possession and UFO encounters. So we'll get to that eventually, but he talks about the convenient cover-up. So the UFO phenomenon was of interest to the intelligence agencies for a couple of different reasons. One, they didn't know exactly what was going on, and he documents pretty thoroughly multiple military pilots that had, sightings of one sort or another in multiple different countries and shows the commonalities there. But then he gets into SETI, again, the search for extraterrestrial life, intelligence. He gets into then Carl Sagan, and we'll talk a little bit about Carl Sagan if you're not familiar with him. Then he talks about the unique elements of Earth that make life possible, and I have a whole list that I've got laid out that we can go through because it really is extraordinary. But he's tying that into Carl Sagan's unexceptional Earth. So this whole theory of UFOs and aliens is built upon a sort of cosmological paradigm that of cosmic random evolution, and that we live on a really uninteresting pale blue dot, if you will. So then he highlights that it's not that uninteresting. In fact, it's very interesting because it's the only piece of empirical evidence we have of life, period. And then he goes on to critique the theory of evolution. We'll be discussing that. He talks a little bit about NASA. He then gets into close encounters. He begins to highlight many of these, reported incidents of people encountering aliens and how it is similar to demonic possession. He gets into Jacques Vallée. We'll discuss who he is if you're not familiar. He's important, and that's connected to the next chapter, interdimensional beings, because Father Spyridon is using Jacques Vallée, although Jacques Vallée, the French, and he's still alive, actually. I believe he's like 84 years old. he was kind of one of the pioneers in UFO studies, or UFOologist. But he was the first one to postulate a theory that they were interdimensional beings, that what the phenomenon was occurring because it was violating the laws of physics and all this different stuff, that it shouldn't be a materialistic search out in the universe for these aliens or these UFOs. He makes the argument that this is an ancient phenomenon and that these are probably interdimensional beings. However, he does not come to the conclusion that they're demons. He comes to the conclusions that it's essentially a more advanced entity that is going to be benevolent and is actually in support of the idea that this is going to undermine traditional religions or Orthodox forms of religion, not just Orthodox Christianity, but this will then usher in a new era of which then people are going to have to reevaluate their fundamental beliefs and essentially adopt this materialistic cosmological worldview. Although he's saying, yes, but there's more dimensions here. Maybe there's more going on. And he's, again, probably playing off of string theory, quantum physics, all this different stuff, and gets into the multiverse theory, right? So one of the cop-outs when people are advancing these cosmological theories is they'll say, well, the universe is so big, there's got to be other life out there. Okay, well, that's not proven. Maybe you want to use statistics, but that's not science. And then they'll postulate the multiverse theory, which is, again, an unprovable theory. So it's really not, the multiverse theory isn't even a theory because it can't ever be disproven, because it postulates there's infinite number of universes and everything that could happen has already taken place in one universe or another. Still, the problem is the creator and how exactly did the multiverse get into place, but we'll move beyond that. Then he gets into Stephen Greer and disclosure. We'll be talking about Stephen Greer, and his big critique on Stephen Greer is his utilization of intelligence and military people. And so he highlights multiple conflicting reports that Stephen Greer lays out, but then he also emphasizes how the same institutions that are trying to cover up the phenomenon are the same institutions in which Stephen Greer then uses as evidence for all these people highlighting what it is. And of course, Stephen Greer is he's into transcendental meditation. He's kind of has new age spiritualities, and he teaches classes on how people can meditate, get into altered states of consciousness, and contact the alien angels, right? Again, that new age worldview typically covers the aliens in a benevolent glaze, and that they're maybe angelic entities, or they're they're who you are in the future, right? Once you're fully evolved and fully advanced. And then he has Carl Jung. We're not going to spend too much time on there, but I have basically the central points of Carl Jung's take on UFOs. Obviously, they're psychological, symbolic, coming from the collective unconscious, repackaging itself in a technological malaise for the contemporary man, all that stuff. Then he gets into occultism, new religions, and alien saviors. So we'll be discussing a little bit about that. The spirit of science fiction, of which major shout out to our brother Jay Dyer in chapter 16, where he's discussing the spirit of science fiction. Father Spyridon Bailey gets also into like Hollywood and various books, and he makes reference to Jay Dyer's books. So shout out to Jay. God bless you. And then he ends with the truth behind the deception, which is actually the Orthodox take. And I will say then there's a conclusion, and we're going to go over in more detail each of these chapters. But I will say before reading the book, I would have expected a little bit more on the Orthodox theology. And it's not that it's not a good book. I do recommend anybody who wants to read it, check it out. But I don't think that's what Father Spyridon was the full intention. His full intention was trying to demonstrate and highlight the entire phenomenon and the paradigm of UFOs and aliens, and then really provide a fundamental critique right towards the end. But orthodoxy is not the central thrust of the book. So I'm sure there's other people, or maybe he's going to do a part 2 in the future that's more on it, the Orthodox take. But he kind of builds upon, again, what Father Seraphim Rose does in this book right here. So again, we got all this to get into, and I got tons of stuff to show you guys. We're going to go over a few of the more interesting videos. I've actually played a couple of them before. A few of them I have never showed, but just trying to talk about the association between occultism and UFO encounters, or experiences. This is a commonality that most people haven't addressed as much. Is people, one of the things that multiple researchers have found and have been coming out about really in the 21st century, more so than the 20th, is that many people have had these UFO or alien encounters tend to also have had one foot in the occult. Could be New Age rituals, could be Ouija boards, could be full-blown magic ceremonies, whatever it may be. But there is a very interesting relationship between who actually experiences these phenomenons. Now, at the same time, Father Spyridon Bailey highlights that's not a indicative of all UFO encounters, because he begins the book with his own wife's encounter, which was apparently witnessed by hundreds of people in Britain. And we'll discuss all that. So smash that like, guys. We got a lot to get into tonight. Should be a fun one. Shout out to Logan Daly. I see him in the chat. Evan throws in $12, says, please pray for me, brothers and sisters. Evan, well, we'll do. Evan, I'll say a prayer for you tonight. Thank you very much for the $12 super chat. Really appreciate that. And I guess while we're at it, let me just check the Dono chat and Streamlabs. And tonight I got the Streamlabs working, guys. So as you saw, the video intro is actually working today. Very thankful for that. And so if anybody sends in a super chat over on Streamlabs, I will be able to bring that up on screen as well. Haven't been able to do that for the last few weeks. So thank you, Lord. I hate all these technological problems, but the Streamlabs and the StreamYard are now working together very nicely. So that is wonderful. Another super chat just came in from White Lightning 777, throws in $5. Thank you very much. He says these UFOs can't be purely spiritual. They've been filmed and tracked with radar. People have been injured. If aliens exist, so can demons. No, they're not purely spiritual. That's one of the points that Father Spyridon makes in the book, is clearly there's a physical happening here. And then he makes reference to scripture in which demons can take physical form or present themselves in various ways, and that people have had contact with these entities, may have been permanently marked in some way. So no, it's not purely spiritual, although they are noetic spiritual entities ultimately, first and foremost. So that's kind of the premise there. But no, we're not denying the physical reality of it. We are denying that they're using some side of advanced technology, because again, I'll speak more to it, but it has to do with where exactly do the demons reside. And according to the Orthodox Church, as he highlights specifically in chapter 17, they reside in the air. They reside above us. They fell from heaven, but they're not in the heavens. They're in a way in our atmosphere. They're in the air. They're the powers of the air. And the devil in Ephesians is specifically referred to as the prince of power of the air. So that's why Lucifer, presenting himself as a light being, Lucifer, Lucius, Prometheus, this whole thing, it makes sense. These lights, these apparitions, these visions that people see, defying the laws of physics, this is the aerial realm. This is the realm in which the demons exist. So we'll talk more about this. White Lightning 777, thank you very much for the super chat. Really appreciate that. And then Logan Daly gifted 5 COTEL Crew memberships. Thank you so much, Logan Daly, for the generous support. God bless you, brother. Thank you very, very much. Shout out to everybody in the chat who received a membership. I'm sure they're very appreciative of that. So thank you, Logan. God bless you and the family, man. Fellow Midwesterner. God bless you. Luchador 1764 throws in $5. Says, has anyone seen Ammon Hillman's interview on the Danny Jones podcast on Christianity? It's closing in on 1 million views. I don't believe I have seen that. I do have a video that's almost 1 million views, but it is with Dr. Hugh Ross. I have not seen the one that was mentioned, Luchador. Danny Jones podcast, I don't know who actually either one of those men are. So unfortunately, that is not something we're going to be watching today, but I may have to check that out afterwards. Thank you very much, Luchador 1764, for the $5 super chat. And major shout out to RIP, been a COTEL Crew member for 2 months. He says, glory to God, the process towards the canonization of Geronda Ephraim has begun. Absolutely. Glory to God for that. And thank you very much for your membership, RIP. Truly appreciate it. Okay, so I got a little bit of a monologue. Before we do that, let me just do a quick little housekeeping in regards to the same old rigmarole. Guys, if you would like to support my work, one of the best things you could do, and I would be greatly appreciative, is to go over to my website and become a website member. I have exclusive video content, of which you can see right here, and I'll be uploading a couple new videos this week, actually, just for members. And if you would like to get access to those, it's just $5 a month. You can do so with this link right here. Of course, we have a private think tank meeting, which we will be next, or actually tomorrow night. So if you'd like to actually be involved in a group of men from around the world talking about the latest happenings in the world from an Orthodox perspective, could be monetary, could be spiritual, could be prophecies, could be anything going on in the political world. We do that in a private Zoom meeting. We have a think tank. And if you would like to join that, that's just $25 a month, or get 2 months free, purchase a year subscription. We have a meeting tomorrow night. So if you sign up, you'll get in on the email list, and I'll send you that link. Also, if anybody would like to sign up for a one-on-one session, you can do so with this link right here. We got multiple sessions available for next Wednesday. If that's something that you would be interested in, sign up here, and we can have a private meeting regarding any topic your heart desires. And then again, major shout out to our brother AC for sponsoring today's stream. Thank you so much, AC, for all the sponsorships and all the blessings that you have bestowed on me. I really appreciate your support. Thank you very much. This is another great topic that he chose. And of course, he likes to choose books. So almost all of his has had me reading books. The other two a little bit thicker than this one, more philosophical. But thank you so much, AC, for everything you've done for me. Really appreciate it. If you also have a topic that you would like to sponsor, you can do so. Whoop, 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 whoop. You can do so with this link right here. Would greatly appreciate that as well. Also, if you guys are in the market for some Orthodox items, go check out orthodoxdepot.com, orthodoxdepot.com with promo code COTEL. You'll get 10% off all items. You'll be able to help me out, as well as a good company here in the U.S., actually in the Midwest. And also, guys, I'm working with, you guys have seen my stuff on the prophecies of the end times and all this different stuff, the promotion of the book, the Blessed Eschatological Visions of the Blessed. Well, I'm working with the Eschaton Vigil, and we are putting together a incredible resource. So if you want to have access to all these prophecies out of Russian and Greek and Serbian and Romanian, and it's all in English, it's the only thing of its kind. We are creating that database. The membership program will be launching soon, and you'll be able to have a search bar. You can search all types. I'm talking thousands. This book only has, just a fraction of what's going to be available, as well as translations of works that have never been in English before. And if you would like to sign up, just go to the eschatonvigil.org. This is a non-for-profit that I'm working with, and I'm very excited for what we're putting together. Go to the eschatonvigil.org. It's a free to get on the mailing list. You'll be updated with everything. And then soon what's about to come out is a membership program just to have access to all this rich data of prophecies and church elders talking about the end times, talking about geopolitics and what's going to be coming in the future. So if you'd like to have access to that, just sign up. You'll get on the mailing list, and we will then let you know when the membership program is available and if you would like to be a part of the Eschaton Vigil. So check that out if you guys are interested. Okay, now let's get into today's topic. And I wanted to begin by just a quick reference to this book here, Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future. This is one of the first books to ever discuss explicitly the UFO phenomenon and the belief in aliens, extraterrestrials, in relationship to Orthodox theology. And so I wanted to first provide you guys a quick little overview of what Father Seraphim Rose, Father Seraphim Rose highlights inside this book. Okay. And so the first one regarding UFOs and aliens is the spiritual deception. Father Seraphim Rose argues that UFO sightings and encounters are not just physical phenomena, but have a spiritual dimension. And this is going to be the point in which our Orthodox worldview is going to kind of cleave itself away from the secular materialistic worldview, because we're not denying there's a physical reality to UFOs and alien encounters. But what we're saying is that there's a larger spiritual dimension to this, and that these entities, from our worldview, are actually demons. And I will try to make that argument throughout today's presentation. And so he believes they are manifestations of demonic activity aimed at deceiving humanity and leading people away from the true Christian faith. And one of the things that Father Spyridon Bailey does in this book is reiterates how many people that have been the largest promoters of the UFO phenomenon or belief in actual ETs, and how they are sort of excited about the idea that traditional Christianity specifically will be undermined. I'm going to highlight this, but many of the people in support of UFOs and aliens draw their spirituality from Eastern mysticism. As you can imagine, obviously the New Age is very into it. And because of that, there's this interesting animosity towards Christianity. So Father Seraphim Rose highlights that, and this is reiterated by Father Spyridon Bailey. Father Seraphim Rose also in this book highlights the historical context. He places UFO phenomenon within the context of historical and spiritual deceptions, comparing them to other supernatural occurrences that have been documented throughout Christian history. Rose asserts that these phenomena are part of a broader pattern of demonic influence. And then he goes into number 3, the psychological and sociological aspects. Father Seraphim also examines the psychological impact of UFO encounters on individuals and society. And he discusses how these experiences can create a sense of awe and mystery that draws people into the occult, New Age beliefs, furthering the agenda of spiritual deception. And this is something, again, that Father Spyridon Bailey picks up, that UFOs, and this was even discussed by Jacques Vallée and Carl Jung and many of the investigators into UFOs, is that it seems like they break down our understandings of rationality, logic, and our own understanding of the world around us, space and time. And so it's a confounding effect. And they highlight that this confounding effect is part of a larger deception, because the modern man is such in a materialistic malaise in the culture. Everything is sort of supposed that science is leading us to truth. The only thing that's real is material. Everything's evolving. And that these aliens, one, obviously advance the evolutionary theory. These are cosmic beings that are so much more evolved and technologically advanced than we are. But it also then represents the opportunity within a materialistic secular world to have some sort of spiritual belief, or this idea of transcendence, or being a spacefaring entity. So that's where Rose is talking about that psychological and sociological aspect of it. Number 4, he talks about, in contrast, UFOs with Christian miracles. He's contrasting the UFO phenomenon with genuine Christian miracles, emphasizing that true miracles lead people to God and reinforce faith, while UFO encounters often result in confusion and departure from Christian teachings. And this is something that Father Spyridon Bailey highlights at multiple points as well, that these people, some of them, now we're going to be looking at the demonic possession and its similarities with alien encounters, because there are quite a few notable similarities there. But the some of these people who have encountered aliens believe that a miraculous healing has occurred, or that these entities are angels. This is very common within the New Age and some of these other forms of spirituality, where this is presented as these advanced creatures that are going to lead us into the future and going to protect humanity from ourselves, right? So not only are they technologically advanced, but they're more morally advanced than we are, i.e., again, we can see how transhumanism and all this stuff fits. But Father Seraphim Rose began with trying to highlight the differences between a Christian miracle and these sort of deceptions that demons can do, false miracles. And then he has the last 2 points, 5 and 6, that I wrote down, is warnings and discernment. The book includes warnings to Christians to be discerning and cautious about such phenomena. Father Seraphim encourages believers to rely on the teachings of the Church Fathers and Holy Scripture, as does Father Spyridon Bailey, to navigate these spiritual challenges and avoid being misled by sensational and supernatural experiences that contradict our Orthodox faith. And then the last point is the eschatological perspective. he views the prevalence of UFO sightings as a sign of the end times, indicative of the approaching end time and rise of a false religious consciousness that will ultimately culminate in the reign of the Antichrist. So I don't think anybody is going to be dumbfounded to hear that, obviously, from an Orthodox Christian perspective, this idea that we have to create a one world government to respond to the alien threat, or the flip side is that aliens have told us we need to form a one world government to advance and become a space faring civilization. This is kind of the Elon Musk bent on the New World Order, right? So Elon Musk he's going to help us. He's fighting for free speech. Well, he also wants a one world government. Because he believes that as a precondition to become a spacefaring species. Well, this is part of an eschatological belief as Orthodox Christians that a one world government is indicative of the rise of the Antichrist. This is what the New World Order is. It's an inversion. It's a dissolution of the boundaries. It's a destruction of the human person. This is why transhumanism and all this stuff is tied together, and we'll probably mention aspects of it today. So ultimately, these demons and the deception that is being perpetuated through the UFO and alien phenomenon is going to lead modern man towards a more materialistic and a paradigm of belief that actually is totally in accord with our understanding of the inversion, the satanic inversion of the world. So that's that. Those are some of the main points that Father Seraphim Rose highlights in his chapter on UFOs in his book, Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future. So check that out if you haven't read it. It is a really good book for the contemporary Western mind. Now, I have a few points that I want to make before we start getting into all this stuff that I want to share with you guys. And the first one is highlighting what Father Spyridon Bailey doing as a paradigmatic presuppositional attack on UFOs and aliens. So the establishment narratives of UFOs and aliens are a totally separate paradigm. And that's one of the important things, because we're going to be discussing how the Vatican and the Catholic Church has totally changed its stance on UFOs and aliens. And then now I have an article actually showing the chief astronomer of the Vatican saying that, aliens are so advanced and they are not necessarily human, and therefore they don't need redemption. They don't need to be baptized. They don't need to be brought into the church. There's something separate. And then we have quotes from Pope Francis saying that, belief in a Christian God and aliens are totally compatible. And here, Pope Francis actually kind of undermines the chief astronomer. Now, the chief astronomer who said they don't need redemption, this came out in 2024, this year. In 2021 or 2020, Pope Francis said that, aliens are great, and if we ever come in contact, we'll have to baptize them into the Roman Catholic faith. So my point is that really, and what Father Spyridon Bailey is trying to make, is that if we're really looking at our spiritual paradigm, our theological worldview, that aliens and UFOs, at least as presented through official narratives or even some of the conspiracy theories, doesn't really jive. It doesn't make sense. And one of them is this random cosmic evolution, right? The fundamental basis on the belief of aliens and extraterrestrials is that evolution, cosmic evolution, is happening all over the entire universe. And that we as Homo sapiens are not unique. Life on the planet is not unique. The Earth is just another rock out in space, and that therefore the universe is so big and it's expanding. It's infinitely expanding. No. It's contracting now, right? This was the latest thing. It's contracting. Well, now in the last 3 years, people are saying, no, actually it's speeding up. Well, they don't know. But because of this presupposition of evolution and then this presupposition of modern cosmology, many people want to then claim that obviously there has to be life on these other planets, despite the fact that there is zero empirical evidence for it. And really, there's zero empirical evidence for the proof of evolution. And I have a whole list of points to show you that. And I imagine many people are going to be surprised when they look at all these points, seeing that, actually evolution has never been and can't be empirically proven. It's part of a philosophy based on the presuppositions of evolution. And we'll discuss some of that here in a bit. And so the technological advancement is the meaning of life. This is another dimension of why the aliens and the UFOs are a separate paradigm. that the whole premise is that these entities are so technologically advanced, therefore they know all the secrets of the universe, they know how the universe works. Therefore, in a sense, for some of these new religious movements, I'll refer to them as NRMs. That's what we typically do when you're researching them. So these NRMs, these new religious movements, they in fact view aliens as a sort of cosmic god or a cosmic angel, somebody here that's going to save us from ourselves, a false messiah. And so one of the things that demonstrate how divine they might be, or how or why we need to listen to them, is because of the advancement of technology. And obviously this is something that I write about in my academic work, and I'm not going to get into any of that, but this presupposition that technological advancement is intricately related to the point, the purpose of the species, the telos of us, and how this is ultimately going to culminate in us also becoming an alien-like creature through transhumanism and through exploring space. And so that belief that they're technologically advanced and that they're going to then come and save us from ourselves also leads to the idea that they're like ontologically superior to us, despite the fact that the common perception of alien grays is like an atrophied body. You know, these things can't play American football, right? They would get destroyed. It's the idea that their brains are so big. Everything is about knowledge, right? Everything is about information. And that ties into Yuval Noah Harari's, again, philosophy of dataism, which I did a whole stream covering. But this is one of the fundamental presuppositions of transhumanism, is that actually the only thing that exists is data, information, and that you as a biological entity, the difference between a Homo sapien and a lion is the ability to process data, and therefore you are a biological algorithm. So in a way, these aliens then are viewed as ontologically superior to us. They're going to lead us into the future. They're going to save us from ourselves. And so it's another false secular messiah. And for many of these UFO religions, they absolutely are that. And I'll show you a list of UFO religions before we start tackling the book. And it's amazing. And as you would expect, satanic churches are also part of these UFO cults. So no surprise there. And so it all insinuates that you and I are morally immature, but based on what moral standard, right? One of the problems with our contemporary world is relativism, and that there is no universal moral standard anymore. It's just social justice, whatever our cultures construct and tell us that we have to abide by to be a moral person, to be a compassionate person. And this whole thing also insinuates that you and I are morally immature, and therefore we need to take advice from the UFOs. And so many new RMs, as I said, view aliens as cosmic angels, and some teach how to contact them. And I highlighted people like Terence McKenna, for example, with his psychedelic experiences down in La Chorrera in the Amazon. His whole thing about taking mushrooms for 2 weeks, every day for 2 weeks, was that he was able to contact a UFO, and that it was the full-blown flying disc, little men coming out, you know, bright lights, and that they basically imparted onto him much of the teachings that McKenna literally says in multiple lectures, that he gets many of his teachings from the aliens and from this particular spiritual or psychedelic encounter that he had. And this is why McKenna was very much in favor of Jacques Vallée, because Jacques Vallée puts forth the idea of aliens being interdimensional entities and not actually out into space per se, but moving across dimensions. And McKenna picked up that and said, yeah, that's why psychedelics bring the aliens to you. The UFOs appear when you take the drugs. But occultism and altering states of consciousness does seem to have some correspondence with UFO encounters and visions. But also Stephen Greer, he's one of the guys, the biggest proponents of UFO disclosure by the government. And he recently has a documentary that's over on Netflix. I forget what the name of it is. Some of you guys are going to know. Stephen Greer teaches transcendental meditation. And of course, for him, he believes the UFO phenomenon is absolutely real. The government is trying to cover it up because it's going to be so explosive to people. It's going to totally reorient their worldview. It's going to undermine traditional religion. It's going to force people to reconceptualize the universe and the world. And so he then teaches people to get into altered states of consciousness through transcendental meditation so that they can then contact the entities. And Father Spyridon highlights one example where apparently he charges large sums for people to join him out in the woods to meditate so that they can then contact the UFOs. And one person was describing how some light, a random light that was in the sky, could have been a satellite, could have been an airplane. And he's like, there it is. There's the UFO, guys. You know, you did it. You did the TM just right, the transcendental meditation. Okay, make sure all your checks are written to Stephen Greer. I'll be cashing those immediately in the morning. So again, another deceptive maneuver, of course. But New Age spirituality is huge on these NRMs and these cults. Let me show you a few real quick. Okay. Okay, we'll be watching this video, but I got a list. Here we go. A list of UFO religions. So as I said, this is actually quite common, and some of you guys are going to be familiar with Heaven's Gate. Heaven's Gate was the group that believed that they were going to hop on the alien spacecraft that was behind the comet. What was it? Haley something. This was in the 90s. And they all committed suicide. I think 30 or 40 people committed suicide so that they thought as the comet passed the Earth, they were going to be able to be taken up onto the UFO. Yeah, Haley-Bopp comet. Thank you, Brandon O'Brien. And of course, they just committed suicide. And again, from a Christian perspective, any form of suicide. Now, we're not talking about martyrdom. We're not talking about somebody killing you for not recanting your faith. We're talking about people willingly killing themselves. Is always demonic. It's always demonic because God never wants us to annihilate the image of God within us. But of course, we see this here with Heaven's Gate. But anyways, you know, these are groups that deal with alleged communication between humans and extraterrestrial beings. Proponents often argue that most major religions are already based on the concept of supernatural beings in heaven. Forms of communication include telepathy and astral projection. Of course, I did a huge stream on astral projection, and I did a second part follow-up with Jay Dyer. So check that out on his channel. But I just want to show you a few of these groups. The Seekers, aka Brotherhood of the Seven Rays. Again, this is we can see what year they're founded in, 1953. The Ethereum Society, 1955. Looks like some German group by Billy Meyer. Don't know that one. Ashtar Galactic Command is by Thelma Terrell in 1977. The Chin Tao, Heaven's Gate, right? That's the one that everybody killed themselves. But one of the more, of course, Scientology. You could probably throw in Mormonism in here if you wanted. The Order of the Solar Temple is an esoteric new religious movement and secret society, often described as a cult, notorious for the mass deaths of many of its members and several incidents throughout the 1990s. Wow, I'm starting to see something that really connects these things. Raelianism is a UFO movement founded in the 70s, France by Claude, Vorlehorn, known as Rael. Scholars of religion classify Raelianism as a new religious movement. Of course, Scientology, Uranus, or Unarius, I should say, sorry. Falun Gong, we actually just talked about Falun Gong, the Rancha movement. But this one right here, Joy of Satan Ministries. This was founded in 2002. This is a UFO religion. Is a website of Western esoteric occult organization founded in 2002 by Andrea Dietrich. Joy of Satan Ministries advocates spiritual Satanism, an ideology that presents a synthesis of theistic Satanism, Nazism, Gnosticism, paganism, Western esotericism, UFO conspiracy theories, and extraterrestrial beliefs similar to those popularized by Zecharia Sitchin and David Icke. Members believe Satan to be the true father and creator God of humanity, whose desire was for his creations, humanity, to elevate themselves through knowledge and understanding. Of course, we see the gnosis, the Gnosticism, the emphasis on information, that somehow we get closer to God, we get closer to the aliens through the acquisition of knowledge. So just want to throw that out. Those are the few of the UFO cults regarding that topic. So, and then also part of this paradigm insinuates that ETs, some believe, are who you and I will be in the future. And so the phenomenon of the aliens is actually you and I witnessing the endpoint of evolution and the sort of the breakdown of space and time, because in a sense, we're seeing who you and I are going to be in the future. And of course, aliens are often presented as androgynous. And when we look at transhumanism and much of the political agenda at hand, of course, they also promote androgyny and the dissolution and distinctions between men and women. And so apparently in the future, we're going to have atrophied little bodies. We're going to have big heads so that we can know all the secrets of the universe. And then, of course, this endpoint is that we need a one world government. And this ties to the eschatological emphasis that it's both a message from aliens, according to some people. Terence McKenna, for example, said that the mushroom and the alien told him that we need to depopulate the planet, that there's too many people, that we need to form a one world government, that nationalism and patriotism is a problem because it causes wars and strife. And so it's interesting that both the aliens, so the alien threat both tells us that we need to do it, the ones who believe aliens are beneficent, but then the ones who are worried about the aliens say we have to build a one world government so we can defend ourselves against them. So whether you think they're good or bad, the alien paradigm is there to tell you that we need a one world government. Now, in regards to our Orthodox Christian faith, this will be my concluding remarks before we start getting into all the content here, is UFOs are real. They're real physical phenomenon. People are really seeing things. It seems, at least in my opinion, to be documented throughout history. Now, I'm not supporting ancient aliens. I'm not saying that all human technology comes from aliens. I'm not saying that, the Nephilim are using us to mine gold in Africa, a la Zechariah Sitchin. But I think the phenomenon is historical. I do not believe that the UFO phenomenon is just located into the 20th century or beginning with Roswell or something like that. And I believe that aliens are demonic entities. I believe that they're noetic entities. I believe that the entire purpose and paradigm of it, obviously, if you followed everything I said, it's going to push you away from a traditional Christian worldview. And it's funny how so many people who have witnessed these things participate in either psychedelics or occult New Age practices. It's a fact. And that the Prince of Power, so when we're talking about this alien UFO phenomenon from an Orthodox perspective, the Prince of Power of the air, the devil, Satan, Lucifer, the angels, the noetic entities that fell from heaven from the fall, where do they reside? They reside above us. They reside in the air. And this is related to, and I'm not going to get into this, but obviously thoughts about toll houses, thoughts about the soul after death. But Ephesians is replete with it. So like if I pull up right here, I got Bible verses about the Prince of the Power of the air. Ephesians 2:1-3. And you he made alive, who were dead in trespasses and sins, in which you walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who now works in the sons of disobedience, among whom also we all once conducted ourselves in the lust of our flesh, fulfilling the desire of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, just as the others. Revelation 12:9. So that great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Ephesians 6, put on the whole armor of God. Again, we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, against the rulers of darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. John 8:4. You are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks of his own resources. He is a liar and a father of it. Be sober and vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking to whom he may devour. And then we have more here in regards to the sort of aerial realm. Let's see. Anyways, I'll share this link. You guys can read more about it if you want. You get the point. Ephesians is probably makes the most explicit references, but we don't need to we got tons to get through. As you can see, look how many tabs I got pulled up. We have a tons of information to get through. So if you guys want to read more about that, feel free. You can do so right there. And then I also find it interesting. Now, this was never mentioned by Father Spyridon or Father Seraphim, but we've talked about the imagination. So the principalities of the air, the powers of the air. Now, I've seen different priests, I think it was Father Josiah Trinum, talk about the unique dignity of man and how we walk upright and how our head faces towards the heavens. And I was thinking, and he made this discussion about our head being sort of in the air, not towards the ground. And I was thinking, well, isn't it interesting that we as Orthodox Christians believe that the imagination is the battleground, right? In a sense, it's the ethereal aerial realm. It's this sort of non-local place that also our imagination, our mind is capable to access. And this is where the noetic entities, the demons and the angels, but the demons most specifically, tempt us. And they battle with us through our mental images. You know, we've all had this where strange things come into our mind, often things that are detrimental to us or loved ones or weird perverted images. This is spiritual attack. And of course, it happens through the imagination, which is not the same thing as your brain. But I just wanted to throw that in there real quick. I wrote it down in regards to discussing the prince of the power of the air. Now, as I said, many encounters share many similarities with demonic possession. And we're going to talk about this when we get through it later in the stream. But such things as the loss of free will. So many people who've encountered these UFOs and aliens describe how they lose their free will. Now, obviously, free will as an Orthodox Christian is made in the image of God, and God never violates your free will, because if he truly loves you, he's only wanting you to love him, which therefore you can't force somebody to love somebody. You have to choose it yourself. And so, interestingly enough, thousands of people who claim to have these encounters or abductions with aliens say that they lose their free will, that they all of a sudden have a sort of bodily paralysis. They can't move, they can't speak, that they're communicating with these entities through their mind. Oh, the imagination. Oh, okay. The noetic realm. Here we go. And so, very interesting that, again, demonic possession and some of these encounters share that similarity. Also, psychological and physical trauma. There's been multiple people discussing how people who encounter these aliens or UFOs or been abducted demonstrate very similar traumatic responses of people that have been possessed by actual demons, and that whether it be physical marks on their body, whether it be psychological trauma that they can't get over, or whatever it is, these things are shared along with that be people who have encountered these entities. A vast majority believe that the aliens and the UFOs follow them afterwards. They always describe a sense that it's present, or that it's watching them, or it knows what it's doing. And people dealing with demonic possession have also highlighted, once a demon sort of got a hold of a person, this is a common experience that people feel, that somehow that demon is kind of hovering over them, watching over them, getting closer and closer to them. Another similarity, and we're going to discuss more here in a bit. And then, of course, ultimately, aliens, as we've already said, my end point, undermine traditional Christianity. Many cults draw inspiration from Eastern mysticism. I have not seen a traditional Christian group also promote aliens and UFOs in the contemporary myth, because it doesn't jive. And you could say, well, the Vatican supports it now. I'm not saying that they're still traditional Christians. I mean, they are literally banning the trad Latin mass. So I don't think, I'm not shots fired, I guess, but the way that the Catholic Church is moving, I don't think that's a strong representative of foundational Christian faith. As Orthodox Christians, it just doesn't jive with our paradigm. It doesn't make sense. What does make sense is that these phenomenons are real. People are seeing things. And in fact, maybe people have personal encounters, But funny enough, there's so many similarities with demons that it seems like that makes the most sense. And then, of course, Project Bluebeam. If you're not familiar with Project Bluebeam, this is a theorized future project in which they're going to use advanced holograms to maybe visualize. So people are going to look in the night sky and see all these UFOs. Some speculated that it'd be like a second coming of Christ, whatever it may be. But Project Bluebeam is going to be using these holographic images potentially to catalyze a global event to form a sort of one world government, a one world response to this, but also undermine many of the traditional Christian faith and then put forth with this false Messiah, obviously people that are going to bow down and worship the Antichrist. So it's a Project Bluebeam, false Messiah, Antichrist, New World Order. It all goes together, right? Along with the green agenda, because for some of these people, there's like eco UFO cults that think that the UFOs have come here to protect the environment from us, right? So what's called, the Pleiadians down is either some have speculated it's nuclear energy, it's our technology. We're not morally sophisticated enough to deal with our technology. Another one is, well, we're destroying the environment, we're destroying the planet. They're coming here to correct our errors and how we're degrading our world, whatever. But ultimately, Christ for these people is seen as a metaphor for the aliens themselves. And so many people who believes in these aliens and UFO phenomenon substitute Christ as, no, that's maybe an antiquated metaphor for the real reality of UFOs. Although, as I said, there's no empirical evidence for these. And we did a whole stream on Tucker Carlson and the UFO whistleblower, I forget his name, talking about this, who eventually, and again, I also agree with Father Spyridon Bailey. Even the whistleblower on Tucker Carlson has ties to the intelligence agency. I think it was the NSA. And so it's like, I have difficulty fully trusting any government official, even if they're a quote unquote whistleblower, because we know for a fact regarding this topic, the intelligence agencies have put out so much disinformation and manipulated. And funny enough, they're behind so many of these groups, including, what is it, To the Stars with Tom DeLonge. I have that pulled up. Interesting enough, Tom DeLonge, where is it? I got it somewhere around here. Yeah, To the Stars. So he reads Timothy. We're going to bring it up later. But of course, this whole project, and interesting, I found a quote from Tom DeLonge actually insinuating that aliens may be some type of demon. I'm going to show you guys that in just a minute. But what was I going to say? This To the Stars Academy. Yeah, so Tom DeLonge, again, the guitarist from Blink-182, founded this group with To the Stars. But interestingly, you look to see like who it is, and it's all intelligence agents. So you have an engineer, and then you have Jim Simivan, retired CIA senior intelligence officer. Oh, yeah, I'm sure a retired senior CIA intelligence officer. He's going to come out and tell me the truth about the disclosure of aliens. That's why I feel like you can't really trust these organizations, because they probably are mouthpieces for the intelligence agencies. But anyways, we're okay. So let's get into some of this stuff. The first thing I'm going to show you is Father Spyridon Bailey, in his own words, talking about the UFO deception. And so this is a video that he posted 2 years ago on his own YouTube channel. Go subscribe to Father Spyridon. He puts out great spiritual wisdom for everybody. This is his video discussing this book when it had recently come out. And so I wanted, if we're going to be talking about his book, I'm going to let him at least have 10 minutes, almost 11 minutes to discuss what it is. Now, some of you are saying, hey, why don't you have Father Spyridon Bailey on? I reached out to Father Spyridon because I love his content probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. And Father Spyridon, the reason why you don't see him on any shows is because his spiritual father told him he only has permission to make his YouTube videos. So Father Spyridon, unfortunately, does not have permission from his spiritual father to join any podcast or platform to discuss stuff. So that's why we'll do with having Father Spyridon speak for himself here. let me just catch up on some super chats. Thank you very much. Daniel Lemon throws in $20. Thank you very much, Daniel. He says Joseph Smith most likely was visited by aliens/demons. He was heavily into the occult all his life. He even received his seer stone from a witch. He also practiced rituals to find treasure. Love to see you cover this. Yeah, I did cover Mormonism. I believe we did I think that was a sponsored stream, if I remember right. But I did cover the intro to Mormonism. I think if you search that on YouTube or on my YouTube channel, it should pop up. But I totally agree with you, Daniel. Smith, he was a liar. He was deceptive. He was a con man. He was deeply invested into magic. His dad and his parents, he grew up in a non-Christian home. They really didn't care for religion. And he got into all this folk magic and stuff in upstate New York where he grew. I totally agree with you. Absolutely. Oh, and Daniel threw in another $5. Thank you so much, Daniel. He says Mormonism makes Christianity more materialistic. Mormonism makes Christianity more materialistic. I'm not sure I understand that one, Daniel, but I do appreciate the super chat. Thank you very much. Shout out to our beloved Dr. Crispy Rothschild, a COTEL crew member for 12 months, says only Generation X can save us from the aliens. Yeah. And then shout out to David Atlas, COTEL crew member for 3 months, says, I bet the Francis is a gay one. Yeah, I bet he is too. And Tapio became a COTEL crew member. Thank you so much, Tapio. And then he gifted a COTEL crew membership. Thank you very, very much, Tapio, for that support. Truly appreciate that. And then let me just check the okay, looks like my dono chat has just gone down. There is no what? Okay, there it goes. Nothing on dono chat. And then over on the Streamlabs, BMX 1966 throws in $10. Let me pull that up since now I can do that. The video is now working. Let me pull that up. So, guys, if you'd like to support, to send in a super chat using Streamlabs or Dono Chat. And now, if you do use Streamlabs, I can pull it up like this. So, BMX 1966 donated $10, no comment. Thank you very much, my brother. Really appreciate that. And let me switch back. Okay, so now let's get into Father Spyridon Bailey's video here discussing book and the purpose of it and what he believed he wanted to accomplish with it. So here we go. I'm going to play this and then we'll dive into and we'll start moving through the entire book for our review. Again, a major thank you to AC for sponsoring today's stream. Shout out to AC and his family. Everybody in the chat, give AC an appreciation for his support for today's stream. So shout out to you, AC. And Daniel Lemon throws in another $10. Thank you very much, Daniel. He said Joseph Smith made God materialistic and confined him to a body. He also made the doctrine that God was once a man who ascended to Godhead. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I discussed that in the video. I did a whole stream on Mormon theology, a sort of introductory overview. And that's one of the points of Mormonism is they believe God himself had a physical body and that he evolved to eventually become God. Which makes no sense at all. And then, of course, Mormonism, the whole point is that all of us are going to partake the same journey and become little gods. And so if you're lucky, like who's the Mormon guy from Utah? Oh my gosh, who's the politician? Mitt Romney. There it is, Mitt Romney. I beat you guys to it before you could correct me. Mitt Romney. Again, I found out that Mormons actually believe he's like this fantastic Mormon and he's going to have his own planet after he dies. So, yeah, that's part and parcel of their worldview. Okay, here we go. Let's get into Father Spyridon Bailey now, and we'll start after this video. We'll start covering the entirety of his book. Let me put, some people like the closed caption. Let me just put the English on there.
Hello, I'm here with Father Spyridon, who's going to talk about his latest book, The UFO Deception. Father, first of all, why did you write about UFOs?
It may seem a strange thing, a priest writing about UFOs, but I was prompted to do so by a number of things. First of all, there's a chapter in Father Seraphim Rose's book, Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, talking about UFOs and the connection between other occult events. And I wanted to pursue a lot of the topics that he raised there, but also more personally, a member of my family, a number of members of the family actually, had a close encounter with a UFO back in the late 70s.
His wife.
And this was an event that, although it's been of interest to me in conversation, not something that we've really focused on or discussed. And I wanted to see how that tied in with what I was reading about, and the research that I was discovering really was raising all kinds of connections that I hadn't previously known about. And then thirdly, just a brief glimpse at what's going on the internet. There are so many sites, so many people becoming very interested in this phenomenon, rather than waning since the 70s when Father Seraphim was writing his book. It seems that the topic has gained more interest. And so I thought it would be important to just bring an Orthodox perspective on this whole subject.
So where does the deception of the title come in?
Well, as I researched the topic, I found really two major deceptions taking place. The first is a human deception. There's lots of evidence that I provide in the
We just got a huge super chat. Major thank you to John 20_29 throws in $100. Says, thank you, Brother David. You have taught me so much. May God bless you, protect you, and seal you and your family always. Glory be to God. Well, thank you so much, John, for that generous super chat. Really, really appreciate that. God bless you and your family, and may God protect you, seal you, and you and your family as well. So thank you very, very much, John 2029. Really appreciate that. Thank you.
in the book that shows that government agencies, military agencies, are perpetrating an enormous deception that's been going on for decades, since the mid-1940s. People's descriptions of the phenomenon, their encounters, their eyewitness accounts have been distorted, suppressed. People have been bullied, people have been silenced, people have been deliberately misled. And there's lots of evidence that provide that this is taking place. But secondly, and more importantly, there is a spiritual deception taking place. The major error, I came to the conclusion, was we cannot lump all UFO phenomenon into one category. There are very many different things taking place. Some of it is military, some of it is secret agency work, but there is a spiritual dimension, and the deception that I'm most concerned about is certainly demonic.
So you mentioned as well quite a lot of famous names, Carl Sagan, Jung. How do they fit into?
Again, for decades, people have been promoting a certain narrative. Carl Sagan, although he rejected the idea that Earth itself was being visited by alien beings, promoted the idea that Earth or human beings could contact alien life on other planets. The whole project of SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, was based on a philosophy, a theory about what it is to exist, the nature of the universe, the nature of man, our relation to existence itself, underpins many of these approaches to alien life and extraterrestrials. Certainly in the work of Carl Sagan, I quote many, many references that show that Carl Sagan was opposed, very opposed to traditional faith, traditional belief, specifically Christianity. Jacques Vallée has been a proponent of the whole idea of other dimensions. And as we see the development of ideas about UFOs and extraterrestrials, the development is very much in the direction of believing that human beings are being contacted by beings from another dimension. Because many of these UFO eyewitness accounts describe something that clearly doesn't fit what mechanical spaceships or mechanical devices are capable of. Even technology that is beyond our own doesn't fit into this category. Carl Jung was very interested. He wrote himself for decades. He researched and showed interest in this topic, but also, as with so many of the different people I talk about in the book, Carl Jung had very serious interest in occult topics, and his interest in UFOs stems from his occultism.
There are many books already on UFOs. How's an Orthodox perspective different?
There are. And many of them are trying to explain the UFO phenomenon from a psychological or a scientific perspective. The whole paradigm is very materialistic and humanistic. And unfortunately, the conclusions that these kind of researchers reach are inadequate to answer the nature of the true phenomenon. When we want to truly understand what's taking place, we have to apply the teaching of the Church Fathers, the teaching of the saints, and the experiences of the saints. Many saints have had experiences in their lives that match precisely what we now call UFOs. So this is not a new phenomenon. And indeed, many researchers, conspiracy theorists, some people would call them, have tried to make out that historically UFOs have appeared in art and iconography and so on. But in reality, what we're talking about here is the demonic. And the demonic can only be understood and explained from the perspective of the Church Fathers.
Another thing you write about is science fiction. Can you say something about that?
One of the themes of the book is the way that a cultural perception has been guided, molded, and UFOs, in a way, are the consequence of this, but they're also part of this guidance of what culture is about. There is lots of evidence to show that people like the CIA and various groups within government agencies are using movies, using television and fiction to guide public perception. And this is very clearly the case when we talk about UFOs. Science fiction has enabled many people to be open to accept the idea that aliens will visit us. People have even been drawn into a paradigm of believing that many planets may have life. And of course, this is a consequence of evolutionary theories. Evolutionary theory underpins many of this science fiction, pieces of fiction. When we look at the idea that life is possible elsewhere, we have to accept, if we accept that paradigm, that life is an accident, that life is possible anywhere, that life has no supreme purpose or meaning here on earth. And as an Orthodox Christian, I would reject this. The Fathers teach us that life is particular to earth. Life is special. It is created. It is not an accident, a chemical reaction. It is not an accident of electricity or some other input of the chemicals and microbes. It is a creation of God. Life itself is a creation of God. And once we grasp that there's something unique about Earth, the idea of life on other planets becomes preposterous. So this rejection has been broken down through science fiction, through popular media, through our culture. NASA, for example, have an awful lot of references from astronauts and members of NASA talking about this. And then we find, once again, their own writings, their own theories are heavily influenced by Eastern religions and by occultism. This is a constant theme throughout the later part of the book. Occultism is a great influence on our culture, and yet it's presented as science. It's presented as that which is natural, and this is not the case.
And where do you see this phenomenon leading?
Already we're seeing which direction it's heading. There is one of the key speakers on this phenomenon called Dr. Stephen Greer. He's financed by Netflix. He's got various programs and research funds. Lots of money has been made available to him to promote the idea that UFOs can be contacted, that ETs will be encountered through the practice of meditation and various occult practices. So this is clearly the direction which this is taken now. It's not just a suspicion anymore. We're seeing it very openly prescribed by those who believe in UFOs. My personal belief is that this is going to become a stronger phenomenon, but also the UFO phenomenon is going to be used in some way perhaps to manipulate or determine public opinion or attitudes to something more. The technology now exists to fake UFOs to an even greater extent than's happened in the past.
Project Bluebeam, of which Father Spyridon actually makes reference to here. I don't know if he says it here in the video, but that's what I was talking about these false apparitions.
And I think this is one of the real dangers that we're facing.
Let alone advanced artificial intelligence. Again, I obviously don't believe that AI could ever become sentient because it doesn't have a soul, doesn't fit our anthropology of what sentience means. But with I've just seen this on Twitter, and of course, we're at the early stages of this development of AI, where it is at now, and the capabilities. But these like false audios of Donald Trump or Joe Biden or Joe Rogan, I've been seeing these, and people can't see a difference. And so just wait until more AI videos now come out of alien contacts and alien abductions and alien visions. AI is going to be a real threat in regards to undermining people's perception of reality.
Thank you very much, Father, and thank you for writing this book.
Thank you.
All right. So with that, I'm just going to show you guys a few more videos to discuss, again, this general thesis that Father Spyridon's laying out and how people like Tucker Carlson and others are also coming to the same conclusions. Now, this one right here is between this researcher, Dr. Hugh Ross, and I brought him up not in this interview. This is a different interview. I showed a different interview last time I did a stream just on UFOs. But he has done a lot of research in regards to UFO encounters, alien abductions, in relationship to occultism. So I just wanted to play that. So we're only going to play just here a few minutes, and then you guys can, and then we'll move on to the next one. But this is just to emphasize somebody. He's a Christian. He's an academic, and he's wrote a book on just on UFOs, diving deeper and deeper in it and doing personal interviews with people who claim to have encounters. And he's just sharing his research on it. So check this out.
This is physical. We know it's not physical. It's not possible. And when you clearly establish that, then the next step is what connection between occult activity, supernatural, spiritual activity, maybe clandestine, dark activity, and UFO sightings have you seen?
Well, I'm the one Christian as an astrophysicist that's written on this phenomena, but I know of 5 others who've spent at least a decade studying the UFO phenomena who are not believers, but they agree with me that we're dealing with something beyond the space-time dimensions of the universe. The French astrophysicist Jacques Vallée, who's put the most research into the UFO phenomena, says we're dealing with interdimensional beings. Now, from a Christian perspective, we would recognize that angels are interdimensional beings. And this is where I think the research on close encounters is important. It was Alan Hynek, the American astrophysicist, who came up with this term, close encounters of the first kind, second kind, third kind. Well, a close encounter is where the human contactee is less than 5.
And let me explain that to you. We'll go back over this, but Alan Hynek was, again, you can see UFO studies undertaken by the U.S. Air Force under 3 projects: Project Sign, Project Grudge, and Project Blue Book. He was a part of all 3 of those. And he developed the close encounter classification system. And this is where close encounters of a third kind, that's where this phrase comes from. Obviously, Steven Spielberg then does a film later in the 70s on it, but he has 6 different categories of UFO sightings. First one is nocturnal lights in the night sky. The other one is daylight disk, UFOs seen in the daytime. And then UFOs that appear on radar, of which Father Spyridon goes over significantly regards to various militaries around the world and their aviation pilots, their jet pilots trying to chase down these UFOs. Multiple examples, both in the US and Iran. in which there was an attempt to like chase a UFO, and that in both instances, the pilots claimed that there was a weird force that was preventing it from getting closer. In America, one airplane pilot crashed, and people don't know exactly if he went unconscious or what exactly was the case. But so that's radar visual. That's the third one. Then you have close encounters of the first kind, visual sightings of an unidentified flying object seeming less than 500 feet away that show an appreciable angular extension in considerable detail. Then you have close encounters of the second kind, a UFO event in which a physical effect is alleged. This can be interference in the functioning of a vehicle or electronic device, animals reacting, physiological effects such as paralysis or heat or discomfort in the witness, or some physical trace like impressions in the ground, scorched or otherwise affected vegetation, or a chemical trace. And then the highest, level 6, is close encounters of a third kind. These are UFO encounters in which an animated entity is present. These include humanoids, robots, and humans who seem to be occupants or pilots of a UFO. So that is really about abduction and direct encounter scenarios. So we'll speak more about it, but I just wanted to bring that up. That's what he's referencing there.
500 feet from the UFO phenomena. And then, the second kind is where they actually have communication. Third kind is where there's actual contact. And what we notice in these close encounters, in no case is it beneficial for the human contactee. It's always deleterious. The best you're going to come away with from a close encounter is recurring, terrifying nightmares. What's the worst case scenario? People have been killed by these encounters. So injuries and death has happened. More commonly, it's the death or the injury of the animals that are associated with the human contactee. And so we're not dealing with something that's beneficial. We're dealing with something that's harmful. And then when you look at those cases where a communication has come from these UFO beings to the human contactee, number one, their astronomy is never accurate.
Right.
It impresses the human contactee who's not educated in astronomy, but it's always inaccurate. And moreover, the phenomena always keeps pace with our advancing technology. It's signs of deception. And now where there is actual verbal communication taking place, a famous incident is where the human contactee was put into a trance and then began to write a book. It's called the Urantia book. And it's the Bible of several UFO cult religions. It's almost 4,000 pages long, and a third of the content of the Urantia book is focused on denying the deity of Jesus Christ.
Wow.
You're a pastor, you should be able to figure out, okay, if that's what's going on, we're dealing with the fallen angels, because this fits what the Bible tells us about the motivation of the fallen angels, the demons.
Wow. That is just such an incredible insight. And it makes total sense, because as you take even a logical scientific journey now, you can see, okay, we have to rule out a physical phenomenon, but that doesn't mean it's not any less real. It's just operating in another dimension, and we're interacting with it. Then you look at the consequences, and then you take all the studies that coupled with that, and you see a very clear, and I hate to use this phrase, but I think it's apropos, like anti-Christ. And so even in that, so wow. Okay, well, let's go a little bit deeper, because this is just so good. As an astrophysicist, just to extend out on this conversation, do you believe that it is possible for life to exist on another planet? So we've kind of dealt with the UFO aspect, but okay, we have this vast universe, and there's got to be something, right, Pastor Mike?
Before I go there, Mike, a couple of my colleagues and I wrote this book, Lights in the Sky and Little Green Men. It's all about the UFO phenomena. But what's unique about the book, it's a scientifically testable hypothesis. Testable in this way. We tell people, read the book. If you're having these UFO encounters, here's a list of occult activities that invite the demons, the fallen angels, to invade your life. If you get rid of all that, there'll be no more UFO encounters. Wow. But if you begin to practice these things, don't be surprised if you have these encounters. And the other point we put in the book is that UFO encounters vary across the globe, much higher in France and equatorial Brazil than it is in the United States. Why? Because there's many more people in France and equatorial Brazil that are involved in the occult. There's a direct correlation between the percentage of the population involved in the occult and the percentage of the population that's having these UFO encounters.
Wow.
And the statistics even applies to the United States. Hawaii and Alaska have a higher incidence of UFO reports than what you see, say, in Montana and Idaho. But there's a direct correlation between the percentage of the population that's involved in the occult in those regions. So there is a scientifically testable explanation for the UFO phenomena. I'm telling people, if you don't believe our explanation, put it to the test.
Come on.
So that's all I wanted to share with you guys there. And then obviously I've shown Tucker Carlson talk about it. This is a newer interview he did, but he's hitting on the same thing. So this kind of rehash, but just want to present it to you guys.
Being curious about this because I don't want to know anymore.
You truly don't want to know anymore
Nope,
about
I
it.
think I know. I think I know what's up. So I can't prove it. Probably not going to articulate it, but I think I know what's up. Yeah.
Can you articulate it?
I think it's a really old story.
What is it?
I'm a Christian and I am fairly sincere about it. I try to be sincere about it, more sincere than ever for sure. One thing that you notice about every world religion I'm familiar with, I'm interested in that topic. There are commonalities between religions. Jesus is unique and I believe in Jesus. So I don't believe in any kind of pantheology. Okay. I don't think they're all equal or anything like that. I think mine is correct. I think that. But there are commonalities that are very striking between all world religions I'm aware of and all creation myths. One of them, and this is of course true for Christianity, very true, is that the belief that supernatural beings take physical form. They all believe that. The Greek myths, Jesus, most famously. It is described in Genesis as well, in Genesis 6. If every culture in the world that we know about, who's left any kind of written or physical record, is reaching the same conclusions about something, maybe there's something there. I'm being curious about this.
So, and he says more about it. There's multiple interviews where he's talking about that. Here's a guy that was going on Joe Rogan, who again had the same exact thing to say. Check this out.
UFOs are real and aliens are real, but they're not from outer space. And that's according to the top 2 UFO researchers after decades-long research. So go to Sabrel.com and
So where do they
it's
think
up
they're
there in
from? If
time.
they're not from outer space.
They're interdimensional and potentially fallen angels disguising themselves because they're liars of something, like you said, can't be proven or disproven. I'm from this galaxy 300 light years away.
This is kind of what Tucker Carlson thinks. He thinks
I-
there's a spiritual element to it. And he thinks they've always been here. And he thinks that this is what's kind of documented in the Bible as like good and evil. And
That's it,
angels.
exactly. I mean, that's what's going on. I mean, the top 2 UFO researchers said UFOs are real, number 1. Number 2, they're not from outer space. And number 3, they're demonic. And that's what I talk about. Where it talks about fallen angels interbreeding with humans, as talked about in Genesis 6, and creating a race called Nephilim, who were men of renown, world leaders.
Could you?
Now, I'm not here to support the Nephilim theory. Obviously, the Book of Enoch is not canonical, and there's a lot of weird speculation about it, but I won't rule it out. So just thought that'd be interesting to kind of be another comment on Tucker Carlson and Father Spyridon. And then here is Tom DeLonge, who again runs the where is it? To the Stars. He was the guitarist for Blink-182 and works with all these intelligence agencies, going to disclose the reality of aliens. But here is an interesting point that I found him actually saying that a lot of people say that they're actually demonic. And this is something I haven't heard him say before. Maybe he has, but check this out.
But it can do all kinds of stuff. It seems to feed off of fear. It can be very dark and threatening at times. I remember laughing at people who would say, it's not aliens, it's demons.
Gosh, I hate the music. I wish it was just the audio.
I couldn't laugh anymore. I'm not so sure about that.
There is a very, very strong link between what people think demons are from the Bible and other religions and the UFO phenomenon. And what you have is something that doesn't like man, period.
So again, if you couldn't understand that, I apologize for the background noise. It's terrible. But Tom DeLonge said there is a very strong link between what people think demons are from the Bible and other religions and the UFO phenomenon. What you have is something that doesn't like man, period. So very interesting. Okay, now we're going to start moving through Father Spyridon Bailey's book. And so I have this banner I'm going to change as we move through the chapters. And so we'll begin with chapter 1, A Reliable Witness. This is where Father Spyridon Bailey begins his book by describing his wife's encounter that she had in 1978. And I'm not going to read the whole description of it. I'll read just a quick paragraph of what she described that she saw. And he writes, "We first saw a golden light ahead of us. My dad made a joke about it looking like a UFO, and we all laughed. As we continued driving, we all watched it getting closer, and my dad slowed down so he could focus on it. As the light slowly moved towards us, we pulled into a lay-by at the side of the road. All of us now very quiet. It kept coming in our direction until it was about 20 meters away on the edge of the field from us, and once it came alongside, it stopped moving and hovered where it was. I couldn't believe how big it was. Bigger than a double-decker bus. It just hung silently next to us. It was shaped like a cigar, a golden cigar, without any windows or seams, completely smooth. But you could tell it was solid. As it had moved, it left a long golden trail behind it that stretched back along where it had been. Even though it was golden, it didn't look ghostly. It looked like a real object. I remember looking back and forth at my mom and dad. I had to confirm to myself they were looking at the same thing I was seeing. If I had been by myself, I would have doubted I had just seen it or thought I just hallucinated it because it was so incredible. They were obviously looking at the same thing in the sky. Their mouths were open and they just stared at it in silence. In the end, I had to ask them if they were seeing the cigar-shaped object I could see, and they nodded without saying a word. After a few seconds, my dad reached for the door handle to get out of the car, but I asked him to stay with us, which he did." And so he talks a little bit about that and then concludes the chapter with the newspaper print that appeared in the, what was it? The Daily Express on January 2nd, 1978. And he has a few little sections circled. I'll read those to you. It said, a giant planes, 3-mile long rocket ships and cigar-shaped objects traveling at what were claimed 5,000 miles an hour. And he says, the newspaper writer says, we had a deluge of calls from around 7:30 p.m. on New Year's Eve. And then I'm skipping, and it says it had a 3-mile vapor trail, an estimated speed of 4,680 miles an hour, and it was an orange or golden cigar-like shape. And then he has circled, now what looked like a plane on fire with a long vapor trail, a cigar-shaped object with a big vapor trail was reported by, again, multiple people. It moved in a straight line with no noise. It defied any Orthodox analysis, he said. And Mr. Hassalis, a neighbor builder, Mr. whatever, saw portholes aflame with an incandescent light. So that was from, and that's how Father Spyridon concludes chapter 1. So he's saying that there is real phenomenon. He uses his wife's testimony and her family, of which multiple people were present. And then he gets into the article discussing that it wasn't just the family, but other people in Britain saw the exact same thing. So that's kind of chapter 1. You got a feel for it. Again, get the book. If you guys want to read more about this, you can get the book yourself. I'm going to move to chapter 2 now. Let me change the title here. Chapter 2. And chapter 2 is the period of modern sightings. Okay, so chapter 2. Now, Father Spyridon starts getting into some of the earlier reports in the 20th century. So he talks about official story about UFOs began in 1933 when sightings were reported in Scandinavian newspapers of what were called ghost ships. In the same year, there were some sightings too in Britain, and eyewitnesses described strange aircraft circling low around the ground, often in poor flying conditions, emitting powerful beams of light as though searching for something. The result was that on the 28th of December of 1933, the 4th Swedish Flying Corps started an investigation to find out what was happening in their airspace. And the following year, Major General Reuterswärd issued a statement to the Press, in which he stated, "There are many reports from reliable people which describe close observations of an enigmatic flyer. The question is, who or whom are they, and why are they invading our air territory?" And so then he goes on to discuss another sighting in London, another sighting in Los Angeles. And then during World War II, he says there were many reports of Allied air crews of small spherical objects that flew around them as they made their bombing runs. And this was something that's really interesting that I also saw just reading some articles, that throughout history, there's a lot of claims of UFOs appearing during battle, during war, during periods of which a lot of humans are dying for whatever reason, whatever warfare it is, but that it ramps up apparently according to one person, and Father Spyridon briefly mentions this in the book at some point, that there's been a lot of reported UFO or alien sightings during points of war or human battle. So I thought that was interesting. And so he's talking about World War II. The bulk of the sightings occurred from 1943 to 1944 and were so common that crews nicknamed the flying objects Foo Fighters, which I did not realize that was the origin of Foo Fighters. I knew of the band, but I didn't know that was the origin. The possibility that the Germans had developed a new technology was taken seriously by military officials. And then moving forward, he talks about more sightings that were reported of ghost rockets in Finland, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. Talking about them trying to contact the U.S. Embassy so that the U.S. Air Force could help their investigation. He goes in to talk about an incident that happened in Greece, that the Greek Prime Minister Saladeris publicly acknowledged that many objects had been in the skies over Macedonia and Salonikia, and a team of Greek scientists were tasked with explaining them. The leader of the investigation was the respected engineer, Professor Paul Santorini, designer of the fuse for the atomic bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. On the 24th of February 1967, Santorini addressed the Greek Astronautical Society and said of the investigation, "We soon established that they were not missiles, but before we could do any more, the Army, after conferring with foreign officials, ordered the investigation stopped. Foreign scientists flew into Greece for secret talks with me." And so Father Spyridon, then he brings up Roswell, New Mexico, and he starts bringing up that at first in the 30s, there's sort of public address of this phenomenon. But as you start getting, especially after post-World War II, that it seems like the intelligence agencies and militaries from various governments are very keen on covering up or providing new explanations for what people claim that they were seeing. So this is from, in 1985, a USAF intelligence report was finally released concerning the appearance of UFOs over Washington on the 26th of July in 1952. And the report states, varying numbers up to 12 simultaneously and unidentified targets on Air Traffic Control Center, Washington National Airport radar scope. Radar operators said there could have been other identified targets on their scopes outside the area of control. All ARTC crew members were emphatic that the unidentified returns were solid. Unidentified returns have been picked up from time to time over the last few months, but never in such quantities over such a prolonged period. So he starts again discussing all these instances in which radar control starts picking up these UFO objects, again, from around the world. His point is to highlight this is more than just a U.S. or a Western phenomenon, but multiple places. And one of the things he does in the book is highlight the Communist Party, the CCP, and they've been investigating UFOs and aliens as well. And so maybe we'll get to that at one point. I don't remember the page, but maybe as we move through, we'll see it. This was an interesting one too. He's describing that on the 14th of November in 2004, this is a famous one. I believe the video you can find on YouTube was a flying U.S. Air Force was flying. It's actually the Navy. They're flying off a ship off the coast of Mexico in a training exercise involving an aircraft carrier, and that these UFO objects were picked up by their radar, and then they saw them down by the water of the ocean. And I guess it was making these, I'll read it to you. It was making these very strange maneuvers that were defying, again, physics. And the pilots tried to chase the object, but it moved way too fast for them to for them to pick up. And so it says, as they approached the target, Fravor, this is the pilot, recalls how calm the sea looked except for white water where there was something disturbing the surface. He describes it as looking like a cross shape that was around the size of a 737 jet, around 40 meters long and 35 meters wide. As this drew his attention, he noticed a cigar or tic-tac shaped object that was around 12 meters in length, which was just above the surface of the water. The pilot of one of the other jets confirmed over the radio of seeing the exact same thing. The object was moving back and forth along the lines of the shape under the water, but was creating no disturbance in the water beneath it. Commander Fravor describes its movements as looking like a ping pong ball bouncing back and forth. Fravor left the other jet that was accompanying him at 20,000 feet and flew down to take a closer look. As he slowly descended, the object changed direction and began to ascend. His impression was that it was reacting to its own jet's presence and seemed to turn towards him. As he circled just 2,000 feet above it, Fravor decided to turn directly towards it to see how close he could get to it. He was within half a mile of it when within a second, the object vanished. The jet above him confirmed that it had vanished from their view too. Commander Fravor then turned back to investigate whatever was beneath the water, but discovered that it also had disappeared. And so then one of the pilots, Fravor, then tries to track down the object, and apparently it was reported on radar like 20 miles away, and they were just blown away that how the object could get that far away that fast. So that kind of concludes chapter 2. Again, the period of modern sightings, where he's just describing all these different incidences in various governments around the world and what they saw and how it was of great interest, but began to be covered up by some of the governments. So this leads us into chapter 3, and that chapter 3 is military and government responses. So chapter 3, and he says, so this one is getting further into the attempt to cover it up by various governments. Let's see here. This is a long quote. I'll read this one. He says, but beyond the interests of noted individuals, governments around the world have taken UFOs very seriously. A few weeks after my wife's sightings, a debate took place in the House of Lords on the 18th of January in 1979. It was instigated by the Earl of Clancarty and made the claim that someone in the government was misleading the public about UFOs, and that there were many of the lords who agreed that the evidence pointed towards a cover-up. One of the speakers, the liberal spokesman on aerospace, the Earl of Kimberley, said in the debate, UFOs have come to the fore since the end of the last World War. So obviously World War II. Among the papers of the late Professor Alberto Tulli, former director of the Egyptian Museum at the Vatican, was found one of the earliest known records of a fleet of flying saucers. It was written on papyrus long ago in ancient Egypt, actually, and it was at that time that Thutmose III, circa 1504 to 1450 BC, who with his army witnessed the sightings of what we today would call UFOs. This worldwide UFO invasion of every country's airspace is of growing importance, and therefore I suggest that Parliament keeps a continuous watch on the situation. UFOs have been coming in increasing numbers for 30 years since World War II, and I think it is time our people were told the truth. It has been reported that the United States and the USSR had signed a pact in 1971 to swap UFO information, but the pact stated that they were to keep the rest of the world in the dark. I believe that the pact was signed so that neither superpower would make mistakes about UFOs being atomic missiles. So now he starts talking about, 3 is really about, again, the cover-up of these various governments. Let me find another good section to read here. This is a quote, U.S. Air Force. So in 1953, Major Donald Keyhoe, director of the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, revealed that both the CIA and U.S. Air Force were working hard to control public thinking on UFOs. He quoted Captain Edward Ruppelt as saying, "We're ordered to hide sightings when possible, and if a strong report does get out, we have to publish a fast explanation, make up something to kill the report in a hurry, and also ridicule any of the witnesses, especially if we can't figure out an answer. we often have to discredit our own U.S. military pilots. Despite attempts by the Air Force to smother the story, by 1960 there was sufficient public concern for U.S. congressional hearings to be held on UFOs. Civilian research groups accused the military of a cover-up, and as a result, the budget for Blue Book, Operation Blue Book, let me pull that up real quick. For those of you who aren't aware, Operation Blue Book, here we go. So Operation Blue Book was the code name for a systematic study of unidentified flying objects by the United States Air Force from March 1952 to its termination in December 17, 1969. The project, headquartered at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, was initially directed by Captain Edward Ruppelt, who I just read that quote saying that they were literally tasked by the U.S. government to cover this stuff up and basically discredit any of the U.S. pilots that would come out about whatever it is that they may or may not have saw. And followed projects of a similar nature as Project Sign, established in 1947, Project Grudge in 1949. Project Blue Book had two goals, namely to determine if UFOs were a threat to national security and to scientifically analyze UFO-related data. And so that is the Project Blue Book that Father Spyridon is referring to here. And he says the budget for Blue Book was increased with additional staff appointed to its work, but the direction of its thinking continued to frustrate many, and criticism of how the public were being treated on the issue only grew stronger, not least from within the project's own personnel, most notably from Hynek, who went public with his feelings and listed detailed failures of the investigation. There was little official response. So who was Hynek? That was Alan Hynek, who we mentioned earlier, this gentleman right here. He was an American astronomer, professor, and ufologist. He is perhaps best remembered for his UFO research. Hynek acted as a scientific advisor to the UFO studies taken by the U.S. Air Force in 3 projects: Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book. In later years, he conducted his own independent UFO research, developing the Close Encounters classification, which we discussed. He was among the first people to conduct scientific analysis of reports, and especially of trace evidence purportedly left by UFOs. So we're going to get to Majestic 12 in just a second. Let me go back to Blue Book. But another wave of sightings in 1966 resulted in a congressional... Oh, and one of the things, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, this is also where, again, whatever happened in Roswell, New Mexico, who knows? But whatever debris that was found at Roswell, New Mexico there was a huge military effort to gather any piece of evidence and then take it to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to be studied. So Wright-Patterson Air Force Base plays an important role in our story here. Guys, smash that like. And if you have any comments or questions and you'd like to support the stream, feel free to send in a super chat using Streamlabs or Dono Chat. And if you're really feeling generous, feel free to gift some COTEL Crew memberships. I know the chat always appreciates that. Or if you prefer to use YouTube, and I'll read all of those as we go through. Okay, so let's move forward. A surprising detail in the U.S. government's response was to pass a law in 1954 making commercial pilots subject to military restrictions with regards to making any public statement about UFO sightings. If pilots informed the media about seeing a UFO, they could face a prison sentence up to 10 years on the grounds that such information could be vital to national security. Okay, skipping forward here. Now he starts getting into the CIA's public face, saying that they weren't interested in the UFOs, but yet at the same time, multiple people were coming out and saying that the CIA was very interested in the research about UFOs. And so I'll read a section here. 3 examples certainly indicate military interest in UFOs, but the true level of concern and levels of secrecy was extremely high. In the late 1950s, members of Congress were becoming uneasy. Representative William Ayers of Ohio admitted that congressional investigations have been held and are being held on the problem of unidentified flying objects. Since most of the material presented is classified, the hearings are never printed. The level of secrecy being imposed, this is a quote, this is from the congressman, the level of secrecy being imposed led Vice Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter, who had been the director of the CIA from 1947 to 1950, to say it is a time for the truth to be brought out in congressional hearings. Behind the scenes, high-ranking Air Force officers are soberly concerned about the UFOs, but through official secrecy and ridicule, many citizens are led to believe that unknown flying objects are total nonsense. To hide the facts, the Air Force has silenced its personnel through the assurance of regulation, highlighting the law that was put in place. Reports of UFOs continued to be made despite the hostile reaction that the CIA and Air Force had managed to create in the media. In 1966, the U.S. Air Force set up yet another investigation, this time through the University of Colorado. In February 1967, the group's lead scientists, Dr. Edward Condon, Dr. Richard Lowe, and Dr. William Price, were permitted access to the CIA's National Photographic Center to view classified images of UFOs. Despite them having Air Force backing, an internal CIA memo reveals how concerned the organization was that the public might discover how serious they were taking UFOs. This is a quote. This is the quote from the CIA's internal memo. Any work performed by the National Photographic Center to assist Dr. Condon in his investigation will not be identified as work accomplished by the CIA. Dr. Condon was advised to make no references to the CIA in regard to this work. After 3 years of investigation, the result was a highly negative report that went to great effort to establish its scientific neutrality while clearly doing everything it could to further undermine witnesses and their accounts. Many people at the time considered it to be heavily influenced by the CIA. And so he goes on to talk more about the CIA and the NSA, the FBI, various groups in the United States. And then he says, beyond the USA, there is evidence that many countries around the world have taken the UFO phenomenon very seriously. The French government first established its investigation in 1952, and 2 years later, the French MP Jean Nocher authorized the French Secretary of Air to set up a commission to distinguish between real and hoax UFO cases. France experienced a heavy wave of sightings through 1973 and 1974, leading Robert Galli, the French Minister of Defense, to make the following statement. A mass of reports is coming in from the airborne Grenadier, from the mobile Grenadier, and from the Grenadier charged with conducting the investigation. It is all pretty disturbing. Galli went on to say that the department had been set up within the French Ministry of Defense in order to deal with many reports of UFOs. It was intended that Galli's interview would be followed with broadcast of interviews with the UFO researchers, but following the broadcast with the minister, his office was burglared and the tapes that he had were stolen. This is the official story. So very interesting there as well. In regards to Canada, he says the Canadian government has followed a similar public line, claiming that little interest while maintaining a policy of misinformation. Researchers point to a memo sent from Wilbert Smith, who was the senior radio engineer for the Canadian Government Department of Transport, to the Controller of Telecommunications on the 21st of November, 1953. The memo was categorized top secret and is one of the key documents used by UFO researchers to prove a government cover-up. In the memo, Smith says, the existence of a different technology is born out of the investigations which are being carried on at the present time in relation to flying saucers. Smith went on to claim that through his links with the Canadian Embassy in Washington, he had discovered that the U.S. government rated the level of secrecy over U.S. as being higher than that of the hydrogen bomb. He said that the UFOs exist, little is known or understood about them or their objectives, and that the U.S. government considered the subject to be of the highest significance. So very interesting in there as well. So that kind of, again, he goes through more. He talks about the Soviet Union. He has about 3 or 4 pages on Russia. And so that kind of concludes our overview of chapter 3. We'll get into chapter 4 now. Okay. Chapter 4 is titled A Convenient Cover. So chapter 4, now he starts talking about how people who are very skeptical of the UFO phenomenon say, well, this is just a cover-up story for advanced technology of various militaries around the world, and that UFOs aren't real, there are no ETs, there aren't real sightings, there aren't real experiences or abductions, and that this is all just being used by these militaries to provide misinformation and alter public opinion about it. That way, if anybody were to see their advanced technology, they would just say, oh, it's a UFO. It's a UFO. So he's talking about how the intelligence agencies first begin to say that they're not that interested in it. Then obviously we find out that we are in chapter 3. Then he starts talking about how the U.S. began to, and various governments began to use the UFOs as a way to cover some of their own technological feats. He says this program of misinformation is revealed in the way that both the U.S. and the U.K. governments have changed their claims about how they treat UFOs. For years, Nick Pope appeared on UK television as the apparent voice of reason, debunking reports of sightings. He was a frequent guest on the less challenging morning shows and repeatedly insisted that the government had investigated the topic and concluded that UFOs were of no interest. Pope worked for the Ministry of Defense for 21 years, including from 1991 to 1994, when he had non-operational duties, which included the investigation of UFOs. Then he became a freelance journalist, and in a 2009 Ministry of Defense statement listed in the government archives, we are informed, quote, the Ministry of Defense does not have any expertise or role in respect to UFO flying saucer matters or the question of the existence of otherwise extraterrestrial life forms, about which it remains totally open-minded. To date, the Military of Defense knows of no evidence which substantiates the existence of these alleged phenomena. He says, however, Pope was permitted to publish an article in New York Times on the 29th of May, 2019, so very recent, titled UFOs Have Come Out of the Fringe and Into the Mainstream. In the opening paragraph, he writes, after years of denial, it turns out that the U.S. government has a secret program researching and investigating UFOs. Pope goes on to describe the Pentagon's secret program, AATIP, and goes on to reference numerous military encounters with UFOs, as well as reports by Senator John McCain on January 8, 2016, of which Pope says the DIA disclosed that they had researched anti-gravity, warp drives, wormholes, and other theoretical physical concepts needed for interstellar travel as part of an effort to understand what they termed as foreign advanced aerospace weapon threats. Okay. Moving forward, we'll skip a couple pages. He talks a little bit about Jung and says that he'll go into more detail later in the book, which we'll discuss. He has a whole chapter on Jung. He says on the 29th of June in 1954, Captain James Howard was flying from New York to London, and he witnessed that he described as strange objects that flew alongside his passenger jet for around 20 minutes. He made drawings of the UFOs, and passengers reported watching them through their windows. There was a single large object followed by half a dozen smaller ones. Captain James reported the large object was continually slowing, changing shape, in the way of a swarm of bees might alter its appearance. He said that after a while, the smaller objects merged with the larger ones and were tracked by ground radar. And this is a very interesting story about what happened in Iran over Tehran, where a very similar experience happened. Let me read this to you. In a U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency report of September 1976, an Iranian Air Force jet F-4 was sent to investigate bright lights being reported over Tehran. As the pilot approached the luminous object, he lost control of his aircraft and all his instruments ceased working. As his jet turned away from the UFO control, they all returned. A second F-4 was then sent to investigate the pilot. In that pilot reported seeing a huge object with multiple lights flashing across it. An official report sent to the U.S. Embassy stated another brightly lighted object came out of the first and then joined with the first object once more. Another object appeared to come out of the primary object going straight down at a great rate of speed. The F-4 crew watched the object approach the ground, anticipating a large explosion. The object appeared to come gently to rest on Earth. So he's highlighting again how these multiple governments are discussing it. And I'll read one more. He says, the writer Paul Dong describes how Chinese researchers have concluded that instead of UFOs traveling at great speed, they arrive by means of something called unobservable light. This is based on the philosophy of the yin and yang and proposed that an unobservable light can transport objects beyond space and time in what is called camouflaged flight. camouflaged because it misleads the human senses. Chinese philosophers suggest that such a movement could overcome physical barriers, such as walls and ceilings, using the mediation methods known as Qigong, or the meditation methods. Many Chinese practitioners claim not only to have experienced a psychic journey to other planets, but also encountered aliens and communicated with them, i.e., again, Falun Gong, that cult that I actually have a video on the channel discussing what Falun Gong is. But that's a spiritual system. Again, the most persecuted spiritual practice in China is Falun Gong. But anyways, that kind of concludes then chapter 4. And chapter 5 begins to get into the SETI project. So we'll bring that up. So SETI, and I have that pulled up. I wanted to, again, highlight some of the things that Father Spyridon mentions that we haven't addressed yet. So Majestic 12. Majestic 12, for short, is a purported organization that appears in UFO conspiracy theories. The organization is claimed to be the code name of an alleged secret committee of scientists, military leaders, and government officials that formed in 1947 by executive order of U.S. President Harry S. Truman to facilitate recovery and investigation of alien spacecraft. Now, this happened right after Roswell. And apparently Truman was already speculating that maybe things might be covered up. And so he created the Majestic 12, and they had it report directly back to him with any of their findings. This concept originated in a series of supposedly leaked secret government documents first circulated by ufologists in 1984. Upon examination, the FBI declared the documents to be completely bogus, and many ufologists consider them to be an elaborate hoax. The Majestic 12 remains popular among some UFO conspiracy theorists, and the concept has appeared in popular culture, including television, film, and literature. It was widely reported by British ufologist Timothy Good, claimed to be in possession of the 1950s era UFO documents. The documents purported to reveal a secret committee of 12. Now, Timothy Good, we will highlight, he is an important figure here. Timothy Good was a British author on UFOs. His books include Above Top Secret, The Worldwide UFO Cover-Up, Alien Liaison, and Beyond Top Secret. And Good has made many television and documentary appearances. Critics challenged the reliability of his writings. Good was born in London, and he also had a career as a violinist. Now, I only brought up that Tom DeLonge in To the Stars again said that he credited Good's book with opening his eyes into the UFOs, leading DeLonge's development of To the Stars. So very interesting stuff there. Now, here's SETI, and this is what chapter 5 is all about. And so SETI, as again you can see right here, is a collective term for scientific searches for intelligent extraterrestrial life. For example, monitoring electromagnetic radiation for signs of transmission from civilizations of other planets. Scientific investigation began shortly after the advent of radio in the 1990s and focused on international efforts have been ongoing since the 1980s. In 2015, Stephen Hawking and Israeli billionaire Yuri Milner announced that Breakthrough Listen Project, a 100 million 10-year attempt to detect signals from nearby stars. So, Father Spyridon, and let's see, he says, in 1971, NASA took an interest and a report was produced which recommended spending $10 billion on a massive collection of dishes called Project Cyclops. Though the budget was deemed too high, the result was increased interest in the SETI project of 1980. Carl Sagan, Bruce Murray, and Louis Friedman founded the U.S. Planetary Society, which had as its major aim the continuation and expansion of the SETI studies. It is interesting to note that later funding also came in part from Steven Spielberg, who wrote and directed the movie The Close Encounters of the Third Kind and directed E.T. There's a good deal of criticism about the amount of money being spent on the SETI program. Chief critic was Senator William Proxmire, and Congress removed its funding from the NASA budget in 1981, but in 1982, the funding was restored after an intense publicity campaign by Carl Sagan. And 10 years later, the U.S. government began a long-term SETI program, scanning large portions of the sky using 43-meter radio telescope. of the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, as well as the observatory in Puerto Rico. The program was ridiculed by a number of members of Congress, but was able to continue when private investors backed the project. In 2012, Franklin Antonio, co-founder and chief scientist of Qualcomm Incorporated, invested $3.5 million into the program. But this was a small change compared to what the hundreds of millions of dollars committed in 2015 to maintain what was called the breakthrough listen. So that was what we were just hearing there with Stephen Hawking and the Israeli billionaire Yuri Milner. So he talks about the U.S. is not alone in searching for alien transmissions. In China, the National Development and Reform Commission has funded the use of 500-meter aperture spherical telescopes. This is notable because it's the world's first observatory built with SETI as its primary objective. Computers all around the world are now participating in the SETI program using a downloadable piece of software. Anyone can allow the SETI at Home project to use their idle computer power. And so far, nearly 300,000 computers have been used this way. After 10 years, this has allowed the SETI program to listen to approximately 20% of the night sky. This has developed into SETI.net, which is equipment that anyone can buy that uses an antenna at home to contribute to the search. The program now includes search for a laser and gamma ray signals and from technosignatures, which is the search for the signs of industrial technological process, such as the persistent light signals or artificially created radiation. Okay. And that kind of concludes, again, he's just kind of describing the SETI project, which, again, anybody can look up. Devotees of the SETI explain the failure in terms. So, of course, they've never been successful. They found no evidence of intelligent life in the universe. They're still spending millions on it. And so they explain the failure in terms of their own flawed approach and insist that with an improved methodology, they will find the evidence that supports their theory. One might ask whether so-called scientific methods should suggest accepting the evidence and changing their hypothesis, but such is the desire to prove their theory and how life begins. They commit themselves to further decades of searching. Despite the amount of money coming from universities and governments, SETI should not be called scientific because there is no clear point at which a negative result can cause the hypothesis of extraterrestrial intelligence to ever be abandoned. Meanwhile, NASA continues to release items for news broadcasts telling us yet more Earth-like planets that are being found, maintaining the sense that we are forever on the verge of finding our cosmic neighbors. In fact, even amongst NASA scientists, there is a growing realization that our planet is not the ordinary commonplace SETI enthusiasts would have us believe. In fact, quite the opposite. But before we consider this, let us pause to reflect on one of SETI's most famous supporters, Carl Sagan. And so that's what we'll now dive into for chapter 6. So let me pull that up. Okay. So chapter 6 is titled Carl Sagan and the Unexceptional Earth. And so he's talking about, and this is actually one of the longer chapters. Father Spyridon goes into really great detail talking about Carl Sagan and his worldview. And so where do we start? We'll say in the book version of his television series Cosmos, he sets out his philosophy immediately. On the second page of the first chapter, he states the cosmos is all that is or ever was and ever will be. And a kind of parody of the opening gospel of St. John, Sagan establishes his belief that it is a physical universe itself. Oh, and let me pull up Carl Sagan while we talk about him. Here we where's Carl Sagan? Here we go. Was the beginning, not with the Holy Trinity. He goes on to throw in casual statements without any scientific or philosophical argument, such as every star may be a sun to someone, which, as we shall see, is wholly confused about what is required for the earth to sustain life. His defense for such statements comes in the form of a hopeful musings. He says, why should we, tucked away in some forgotten corner of the cosmos, be so fortunate? Who it is that might be doing the forgetting he doesn't explain. Sagan's atheism morphs into pantheism just a couple of pages later when he states the earth is our home, our parent. Sagan is open with his readers and TV viewers that he acknowledges the true motives for his longing to prove alien life actually exists. He says the nature of life on earth and search for life elsewhere are two sides of the same question, the search for who we are. He is so sure of his belief that he describes the discovery of extraterrestrials as being a cosmic inevitability. It is with the sense of inevitability that he proceeds to tell his audience that life will be found, that we are nothing special, that we exist as a result of random chemical reactions, which through a process of impersonal selections results in us. God has no place in this process, because once this proof is found, it will be shown that all religion is the thinking of ignorance. He says, all life on earth is closely related. We have a common organic chemistry and a common evolutionary heritage. How can Sagan be so sure? He tells us on page 40 that evolution is a fact, not a theory. Sagan reveals his own emotional and psychological desire to deny God when he says, quote, a designer is natural, appealing, and altogether human explanation of the biological world. But as Darwin and Wallace showed, there is another way, equally appealing, equally human, and far more compelling, natural selection, which makes the music of life more beautiful as the eons pass. And he says, even Darwin acknowledged in The Origin of Species that the Cambrian explosion is geological evidence that is in direct conflict with the theory of a common ancestry. In a relatively short geological period, and let me bring up the where is it? There it is, the Cambrian explosion. Here's the Cambrian explosion. So according to its theory, there was an explosion in biological life, and even Darwin, again, as it highlights right here, and in his 1859 book, On the Origin of Species, Charles Darwin discussed the inexplicable lack of earlier fossils as one of the main difficulties for his theory of descent with slow modification through natural selection. And so Father Spyridon says, that many kinds of life came into existence without any fossil connections with the life forms that existed before them. Sagan at least mentions this, but says soon after the Cambrian explosion, the oceans teemed with different forms of life, but he offers no explanation of how they got there. Darwin stated that once the fossil records were explored more fully, the evidence to support evolution would be found. With similar motives to Sagan's search for ETs, geologists have dug and scraped every corner of the earth only to discover that the Cambrian explosion occurred over an even shorter period of time than Darwin had even imagined. And so continuing forward, I'll just read some of the quotes from Carl Sagan here that he highlights. He says, Sagan's confused philosophy takes a different turn when he uses the language of Plato's forms to suggest the eternal nature of geometry. He quotes Kepler saying, geometry existed before the creation. It is co-eternal with the mind of God. Geometry provided God with a model for the creation. Geometry is actually God himself. This is according to Carl Sagan, right? Yeah, geometry is God himself. That makes a lot of sense. And as an atheist, how exactly do you ground that metaphysic, Carl Sagan? I'd be very curious. Of course, he can't. Next one, he goes on to say, Sagan manages to simultaneously believe two entirely opposed ideas about the Earth. He dismisses its value or uniqueness when comparing it to the larger planets when he says, these are serious planets, not fragmentary worldlets like the Earth, but then attempts to present himself as a concerned ecologist when he worries about the effect of cutting down forests. He quotes, forests are darker than grasslands, and grasslands are darker than deserts. As a consequence, the amount of sunlight that is absorbed by the ground has been declining, and by changes in the land, we are lowering the surface temperature. It's global freezing. Might this cooling increase the size of the solar cap, which, because it is bright, will reflect still more sunlight from the Earth, further cooling the planet, driving a runaway albedo effect. Oh my gosh, can you believe that? The world's actually going to freeze. Of course, only 10 years later, they say it's getting warmer. Sagan's dismissal of the special nature of the Earth extends to the creatures living on it, particularly human beings, though he places a high value on intelligence, particularly the highly developed kind that can produce vehicles. He does not consider the existence of human life as anything extraordinary. Since the random collision of chemicals in primordial soup can produce life, why should whatever happens to evolve be of any particular value? He suggests that biologists might one day master the art of creating human life. Oh, like transhumanism, like synthetic wombs, like chimeras. Although he humbly acknowledged that this is far beyond our capability and will probably be so for a very long time, note again the implied inevitability of the expectation. So inevitable that this creation that he manages to see it everywhere. He says the colors of Jupiter speak to us of chemical events that 4 billion years ago back on Earth led to the origins of life. As we shall see, Sagan's assumptions were based on the limited scientific knowledge of his day, which has since grown to knowledge or grown to a point where his beliefs have found to be false. Of course, they're still echoed by the promoter of 1,000 different genders, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Here's another quote. So he says, an odd comment from a man, talking Sagan, who considers the Earth nothing more than a forgettable little speck, while Christians maintain that the whole Earth is an icon of God. Sagan continues, who are we? Where are we? We find that we live in an insignificant planet on a humdrum star lost between two spiral arms in the outskirts of a galaxy, tucked away in some forgotten corner of a universe. If we are to deal with the cosmos, we must first understand it, even if our hopes are for some unearned preferential status are in the process contravened. Then he goes on to say, Sagan rejected the idea that UFOs could be extraterrestrial visitors, which is partly why he was so keen supporter of the SETI project, since he believed that it would be the only way to prove his theories about the origin of life. He writes, the two Voyager interstellar spacecraft, the fastest machines ever launched from Earth, are now traveling at 1/10,000th of a speed of the light. They would need 40,000 years to go to the nearest star. Do we have any hope of leaving Earth and traversing the immense distances? Asked Carl Sagan. And so, anyways, it's filled with Father Spyridon grabbing quotes from Sagan, like saying that it's natural to worship the sun. This is a quote from Sagan. Our ancestors worshiped the sun, and they were far from foolish. If we must worship a power greater than ourselves, does it not make sense to revere the sun and the stars? Some foolish men declare that a creator made the world, declared Sagan. The doctrine that the world was created is ill-advised and should be rejected. He said, this is what Sagan writes, no civilization can possibly survive to an interstellar spacefaring phase unless it limits its numbers, meaning depopulation of the planet. A society with a marked population explosion will be forced to devote all its energies and technological skills to feeding and caring for the population on its home planet. This is a very powerful conclusion that is in no way based on the idiosyncrasies of a particular civilization. Any civilization that engages in serious interstellar exploration and colonization must have exercised zero population growth for something very close to many generations. So he's literally advocating people don't have children. So again, he goes on, Father Spyridon goes on for another 5 to 6 pages on Carl Sagan and his unimportant Earth. And so then chapter 7 is life on Earth. So let me pull that one up. Oh, chapter 7, life on Earth. And this is where Father Spyridon is talking about the uniqueness of the Earth and all the various factors that it takes to allow life to live on this planet, of which I got a list right here. And these are the unique factors that make life on Earth possible. So again, this is totally random, guys. This was a random event, not a big deal or anything like that. But energy metabolism is one. The solar energy, surface and near surface energy only. Geochemical energy surface provide the necessary energy for life to exist. Conducive physical conditions. Our temperature is just right. Extreme diurnal temperature fluctuations, low pressure, strong ultraviolet, germicidal irradiation, galactic cosmic radiation and solar particle events, solar UV-induced volatile oxidants, climate in its variability, substrate, high CO2 concentrations in the global atmosphere, transport, right distance from the sun, protected from harmful solar radiation, insulating the atmosphere, right chemical ingredients for life, constant cycling of elements, and of course, water. So these are just a few of the notable things that you actually need for life on Earth. And this is some of the things that Father Spyridon goes on about talking about. Well, he provides a criticism of natural theology and just the observation of the world, but then goes on to highlight that these natural philosophers believe that, you know, life on Earth isn't very important, when in fact it's very, very important. He also goes on to criticize dark matter and talk about how it's, again, can't be proven. It's a totally theoretical thing that people take as fact. What else? Oh, he highlights that many of these people believe that Earth, or that religion and science are in direct conflict, and therefore religion and any orthodox form of religion needs to be done away with if we're going to evolve further. And then Father Spyridon talks about water. Earth's surface is 70% water at places reaching a depth of 11,000 meters. Water is considered essential for life because of its many different qualities. For example, liquid water is a universal solvent, which enables nutrients, essentials for life, to be carried around the world. That transport that we looked at, making it also an ideal medium for chemical reactions. Water not only transports different molecules to places where reactions may occur, but does so while maintaining their integrity. So he goes on for a few, actually two pages talking more about water. He's talking about the different problems with other planets and our solar system. Again, what makes the Earth unique. Talks about the magnetic field that protects us and requires tectonic plates. Is not just the size of our neighboring planets, he says, that is vital for life. The size of the Earth must also be within a narrow range for life to exist. If a planet is much smaller than Earth, its gravity will be weaker, which would result in it losing its atmosphere too quickly. And the larger surface area to volume ratio would create a cooler interior that wouldn't permit a sufficient magnetic field. And then he goes on 4 more points about unique features of the Earth. Then he's talking about the uniqueness of the moon. And the moon's gravity. He's talking about the cosmic habitable age. So this has been known as the cosmic habitable age because just as there are only certain places that are habitable, so too the conditions for life do not occur throughout all time. If we speak once more to the paradigm from which scientists work, believers in the Big Bang see the condition of the universe just after it came into existence as having no stars and consisting of dense hot plasma of elementary particles. At this stage, the heavy elements required to form human bodies had not yet been synthesized. The accepted understanding within astronomy is that it took a few 100 million years before stars came into being and began to eject life-essential elements. The size of the Milky Way means it has collected heavy elements more quickly than other less massive galaxies. And so he's talking a little bit about the Copernican principle, and kind of finishes with that. Just talking about, again, the importance, the sort of Goldilocks elements of the Earth is where he ends that. So, all right, let's get into chapter 8 here. Here we go. The theory of evolution. I was looking forward to discussing this chapter here. Okay. So the theory of evolution. Guys, smash that like. And if you would like to support my work, have any questions or comments, or enjoying the stream, feel free to send in a super chat using Streamlabs or Dono Chat. Or if you prefer to use YouTube. Would greatly appreciate that. Let me just check real quick to see if we have any new super chats. Oh my gosh, we got another generous super chat from John 2029. John throws in another $100. Thank you so much, John. He says, why not another $100? You are doing God's work. Glory to God, brother. He has truly blessed you with a keen mind, shepherding people towards orthodoxy, where the ordained can take on the truly hard work. Your cross must be heavy. Well, thank you so much, John. I truly appreciate that generous support, my brother. Thank you very, very much. God bless you, man. Thank you. Thank you. And God bless you and your family as well. I truly appreciate that you like the stream and appreciate the channel. So thank you very much. And Tapio gifted a COTEL Crew membership. Shout out to Tapio. Thank you very much. That's the second COTEL Crew membership he gifted. Thank you very much, Tapio. And let me just check the dono chat. Looks like nothing is on the dono chat and nothing came in through Streamlabs. So thank you again, John. Very, very generous, brother. Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate that support. David says 100 pounds. Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. And pounds are a little bit more than dollars, so I truly appreciate it. I just say dollars for everything. People want me to give the correct name for currencies. People send in from all different places. So I always just say dollars. Just FYI. No, I know that they're pounds, but thank you very much, John. God bless you and your family. Thank you. So now chapter 8, I'm not going to cover too much of what Father Seraphim says, but I have my own list of things. He's making the point that the theory of evolution cannot be empirically proven and never has been empirically proven. And I just have a quick little overview of things that we can look at to see this as the case. So this is me using the AI on the Brave. I don't know if you guys, what web browser you guys use. I'm a big fan of Brave, and their AI is actually pretty decent. And I was surprised that it gave me these answers. So I said, list the reasons why evolution has not been empirically proven, right? Most people believe that evolution has absolutely been empirically proven and that it's, you're backwards if you don't believe in it. Well, actually not. Lack of absolute certainty. Evolution is not a formally provable concept in the same way that mathematical theorems are. In natural sciences, terms like validated or corroborated or more appropriate, as absolute certainty is not possible. Now, if we found the fossil record of a single ancestor, we could prove it. Uncertainty empirical claims. Evolution is not an empirical claim, although it uses empirical methods to claim it. Absolutely. But I love this. If it's not an empirical claim, claims are subject to revision or even rejection as new evidence emerges. Well, it's a philosophy. It's a philosophy. It's not an empirical science. And that's one of the points here that Father Spyridon Bailey makes, is that this is more, and this is also reiterated, Father Seraphim Rose in Orthodoxy Related to the Future, when he talks about evolution, highlights the same thing, that it's a philosophy, and due to the presuppositions, you can hardly ever disprove it to somebody who's already bought into those precepts. And so next one, no direct observation of evolution. Evolution is not directly observable, and its occurrence is inferred from indirect evidence, such as fossil records and comparative anatomy. But it's still, we haven't found the fossil record that shows that one species emerges from another species. And again, you can highlight the logical problem. This was actually, E. Michael Jones mentioned this in his Logos. What was his book? The History of Logos or something like that. Well, it wasn't exactly Orthodox, very Western Christian Catholic text, but he does make a great point about evolution in regards to some of the logical inconsistencies. So if natural selection is built upon survival of the fittest, how exactly can an animal, the first animal to say have wings, let's say a pterodactyl, or let's say a bat, we're told that bats are a form of a rat, right? It's a mammal. Well, the stages in which the rat had 4 legs and began to develop an impingement on its side of a wing, how many generations does it take for the wing to emerge, and the bone structures and the knowledge of how to fly? Well, during that process of that appendage growing, it would be susceptible to prey. There's no way it'd be more successful. So when you look at things like eyeballs and wings, there's a logical problem with evolution, because how exactly can a species go from having an eyeball that's fit for its particular environment, say it's a reptile or whatever, it's an aquatic species, and it moves into terrestrial realm? The eyeballs would not be equated for it, and the process of which the eyeball changes would make that species less suitable, less survivable, less successful. So how does it move from one to another? That's a difficult logical problem that evolution can't explain. And the fact that we can't find empirical evidence of the fossil record to show us shared ancestry is the point. Oh, shout out to Jim Bob. Jim Bob's in the chat. Shout out to Jim Bob and the crew. God bless you, Jim Bob and the family. He says, "We was chemicals." True. That is their motto. So what else? Lack of empirical evidence of evolution in the present. There is no empirical evidence that evolution is occurring at present and has occurred in the past. Wow. Wow, I'm told the opposite. Alternative explanations. Creationism and intelligent design are alternative explanations for the diversity of life on Earth, which do not rely on evolution. Oh, how about that? Lack of evidence for the mechanism of evolution. The specific hereditary mechanism proposed by Charles Darwin, pangenesis, was disputed and lacks supporting evidence. Wow. So the foundational mechanism? Huh. I thought science proved that one. Uncertainty about the mechanism of evolution. The mechanism of evolution is still not fully understood, and uncertainties about the mechanism persisted until the 1930s. Of course. No empirical evidence for the law of increasing entropy. The law of increasing entropy, which states that all systems tend to go downhill towards disorganization and decreased complexity, is not empirically proven and contradicts the concept of evolution. Exactly. Why is life budding and moving through entropy to become something more and more complex? Makes no sense. No empirical evidence for the origin of life. The origin of life on Earth is still unknown, and there's no empirical evidence to support the idea that life evolved from non-living matter. Huh. Wow. No empirical evidence for the transition from one species to another. There is no empirical evidence to support the idea that one species can transform into another through evolution, and it's never been proven. Oh, I got to scroll down so you guys can see that more. There's the last one. Wow. So there is no empirical evidence to support the idea that one species can transform into another through evolution. Well, I was told in school that, this is just science fact. And yet science and the empirical methods of investigation actually in no way, as you can see, can empirically prove evolution. It's a philosophy. It's an abstract worldview. It's not actually science. It can't be disproven. Or at least you could. I mean, many creationists have wrote really compelling books disproving it. But if you subscribe to the presuppositions, everything fits in the evolutionary scheme. So this is what Father Spyridon Bailey's going through in this chapter 8. And so he says, Father Seraphim makes it clear that if God so willed one species should change into another, it would not be something Christians could not believe, but simply that the scriptures and the fathers of the church teach that is not the way God created us. Evolution is a product of modern thinking. It is a symptom of a change in man's perception rather than a conclusion that must be reached from the evidence. The book of Genesis states that all creatures were made according to their kind. They did not become through a process of change from something else. And so just for those who aren't familiar, speciation, microevolution, not macroevolution. Macroevolution, species morphing into other species. Obviously, I don't know many Christians that don't believe in speciation, right? So different shark species inhabit different niches in the ocean. Okay. And they develop different colors, different phenotypes. Okay. There's when you take a bio 101 class in university, they'll teach you about the squirrel species that was on two different sides of the Grand Canyon and how they developed different colors and coats, different sizes based on what was available to them. Okay, that works. But the first squirrel did not evolve from something else. That's their problem. That's the big hang up with macroevolution. So I just want to make that distinction for anybody watching. Father Seraphim stresses that if we are mistaken if we try to interpret the scriptures according to any scientific theory, but instead we must accept the interpretation by the Holy Fathers, not least because science can fall prey to speculations such as the evolutionary theory. This speculation is revealed to be an error most specifically when it speaks about the origin of man. While evolutionists will argue that we are the product of a random process of change, the scriptures of the Holy Church describes a very different beginning. As St. Gregory of Nyssa writes, the first man and the man born with him received their being in a different way. The latter by copulation, the former by the molding of Christ himself. And then he highlights various church fathers that have echoed the same thing. Belief in evolution is not scientific, writes Father Spyridon. This is a bold statement, but without observable evidence to support it, the theory does not satisfy the criteria necessary for it to be considered science, because it can't be empirically tested and proven. There has never been found a single piece of evidence for evolution from one distant kind of organism into another. Even some evolutionists have acknowledged this. Jeffrey Schwartz, professor of anthropology at the University of Pittsburgh, stated that it was and still is the case that with the exception of Dobronsky's claim about a new species of fruit fly, the formation of a new species by any mechanism has never been observed. This may come as a surprise to those outside the field of biology, but is well-known fact amongst those who work within it. The references to the fruit fly is based on the attempts by evolutionary geneticists to induce mutations in flies in order to create a new species of fly, and all their attempts failed. So even by altering and imbuing the fruit fly with mutations, it still didn't work. It still didn't work. So he's talking about how this is a philosophy and this is more of a belief system. Evolution is more of a belief system built on abstract principles more than an empirical science, despite what people want to tell you. And so he concludes the chapter by saying, what is noticeable is the way evolutionary theory is used to present expectations about the existence of alien life, not only as possible, but they are inevitable. Throughout the article, the writer makes constant references to natural selection as the driving mechanism that must exist without God. For example, the quote, and this is coming from in 2017, Cambridge University published an online article titled Darwin's Aliens. That's what he's reading. And so the first quote says, evolutionary theory can be used to make predictions about aliens. We argue that aliens will undergo natural selection, something that should not be taken for granted, but that rests on the firm theoretical grounds. Given aliens undergo natural selection, we can say something about their evolution. In particular, we can say something about how complexity will arise in space. He goes on to say, we can ask then, will aliens undergo natural selection? Evolutionary theory tells us that for all but the most transient and simple molecules, the answer is yes. Without a designer, the only way to get something with an apparent purpose of replicating itself, something like a cell or a virus, is through natural selection. Consequently, if we're able to notice it is as life, then it will have undergone natural selection or have been designed by something that itself underwent natural selection. Okay. So you guys get it. That concludes chapter 8 and his take on undermining the theory, the unprovable theory of Darwinian evolution. Now, the next chapter begins to get into NASA, where he brings up Operation Paperclip. Operation Paperclip, for those of you who aren't familiar, is the secret United States intelligence program in which more than 1,600 Nazi scientists, engineers, and technicians were taken from Germany to the U.S. for government employment at the end of World War II in Europe. Also, there's Operation Ratline, if you're not familiar with that. Operation Ratline. Assistance of escape routines for German Nazis and other fascists fleeing Europe from 1945 onwards. These escape routes mainly led toward heavens in the Americas. Okay. So you guys, so he brings up Operation Paperclip in Werner von Braun being brought to the United States to lead the space exploration of the U.S. And so let's find a good place to start in this chapter. he talks about NASA's keen interest in aliens and says NASA has been talking about the discovery of ETs with the same confidence that Stephen Dick expressed. This is the person he mentioned previous in a paragraph. New approaches. This is Stephen Dick. Stephen Dick expressed on April 7th, 2014 on their official website stated that new approaches and new technology for detecting sentient beings elsewhere suggest that there is good reason to expect that we could uncover evidence of sophisticated civilizations, the type of aliens we see in the movies and on TV within just a few decades. Beneath this outlandish claim, the astronomer Seth Shostak outlines NASA's reasons for believing in such things. NASA's Kepler spacecraft launched in 2009 to survey our region in the Milky Way galaxy, identified a large number of Earth-sized planets outside our solar system where conditions could potentially permit the presence of life as we know it. Inside of our solar system, new information about Saturn's moon has spawned speculation about the possibilities of life there. The same about Jupiter's moon, Europa. And in 2015, NASA announced strong evidence that liquid water flows intermittently on present-day Mars. I doubt that. Father Spyridon goes on to say that NASA has been involved with the issues of UFOs for over 60 years, and from the very beginning, they were focused on controlling public perception. In 1960, the U.S. government had a report made on the potential impact of alien contact with Earth. It was carried out by the Brookings Institute for NASA and produced a document entitled Proposed Studies on the Implications of Peaceful Space Activities for Human Affairs. Chief among its findings was that the American public should be prepared for the psychological impact of an alien encounter. In order to survive such an event, even in 1960, the proposal was to change the way people live and think. The report says anthropological files contain many examples of societies such as their place in the universe. We have such disintegrated when they have had to associate with previously unfamiliar societies espousing different ideas and different life ways. Others which have survived such an experience did so by paying the price of changing in values and attitudes and behavior. So NASA's saying that one of the benefits of the realization and the findings of UFOs is that it's going to force us to sort of recontextualize and re-envision our lives in the worlds around us. No surprise. Super chat just came in. Shout out to Foregone, throws in $5, says, I'm late to the stream. Where can I buy the book? Amazon. It's just the UFO Deception, an Orthodox Perspective, by Father Spyridon Bailey. So right now we're just going over some of the chapters. Thank you very much for the $5 super chat. And we're really gearing towards the second half of the book. Oh my gosh, over on Dono Chat, I just got a very generous super chat from Blue Skittle. Shout out to Blue Skittle. My gosh, brother, he just threw in $100 and said, Dono Train. Well, thank you very much, Blue Skittle. God bless you, brother. Thank you very, very much. And Justin Henley sends in $5, no comment. Thank you very much, Justin Henley. But thank you very much, Blue Skittle. That is very generous of you. And again, a major thank you to John 2029 for his support today. Really appreciate that, guys. Thank you. And shout out to Blue Skittle. Really appreciate you, bro. Okay, let's continue forward here. You guys, he just goes on to talk about NASA's involvement in UFOs. He talks about Operation Paperclip. The Soviet Union also took German scientists into their research and development facilities. It was von Braun who was the head of the team that developed the Saturn V rocket that carried the Apollo 11 mission to the moon. He also talks about one of the UFO advancers talking about moon bases. Oh, actually, that's from Stephen Greer. Maybe that's in the next chapter. He's kind of making reference to it. I think he talks more about it. Anyways, you guys get it. The whole chapter 8 is about, or chapter 9 is about NASA. You can look, you can get the book. You can read more about it. It's kind of repeating things that we've already said. So let me change. We're going to chapter 10 now. Chapter 10, which is close encounters. Close encounters. So now he's talking about people who claim to have contacted or had a close encounter with aliens. And he talks about Hynek's various system. So again, he discusses Alan Hynek, who we've already looked at here, and then his system of close encounters, which we've looked at here. So we're going to skip most of that. Those are the first few pages. He's talking about that. And then he goes into Dr. Jacques Vallée, who we shall consider in more detail later. He has a whole chapter on him. We'll get to that here in a few. And he starts talking about Timothy Good. He says, here we see the enraptured witness seems almost enchanted by the effect of the light and remains focused. I'll read the encounter. So this is coming from China. And it says, it opened its door and a flood of intense light like sunbeams darted out of it. Then the outer shell opened up, appearing as large as a bed with a big pearl, the size of the first, illuminating the interior in silvery white. The intense silver white light shot from the interior was too strong for human eyes to behold. It cast shadows of every tree within a radius of 10 miles. The spectacle is like the rising of the sun, lighting up the distant sky and woods in red. Then all of a sudden, the object took off at a tremendous speed and descended upon the lake like the sun setting. And he says, here we see the enraptured witness seems almost enchanted by the effect of the light and remains focused on the physical manifestations of what is happening. But even enthusiastic believers in the benign nature of UFOs have to acknowledge that the effects of these encounters can be harmful. Timothy Good, who we already looked at, let me pull him back up. We skipped the Drake equation. Here's Timothy Good. Timothy Good reproduces a report from an eyewitness of a UFO incident in 1955, which states that as light was emitted from the UFO, quote, I suddenly seemed to be pushed over and I fell down in the snow with my bicycle on top of me. What is more, I could not get up again. Although the bicycle only weighs a few pounds, it seemed as though an unseen force was holding me down. I felt rather dizzy, as though I had received a near knockout blow on the point of the chin. And so let me bring up this. This is really interesting. How UFO encounters have been seen as similar to demonic possession. So as I said, loss of free will, both UFO entities and demonic encounters have been reported to attempt to dissuade individuals from exercising their free will or to manipulate them toward specific actions. Disregard for free will. Both types of entities have been known to disregard an individual's free will, then forcing them to participate in activities against their will. We're talking about UFO encounters and demonic possession. Trauma and psychological distress. Both UFO abductions and demonic possessions have been linked to severe psychological trauma and distress in those who experience them, as well as physical trauma. And similar descriptions of entities. Descriptions of UFO entities and demonic entities often share similar characteristics, such as a lack of physical form, ability to manipulate the environment, and a sense of malevolent intent. Interesting. Very interesting. Now, this article is a Christian article talking about close encounters of a demonic kind, the truth behind alien abductions. I'm going to read this one section here because it covers some of the stuff that Father Spyridon's covering in his chapter. There is a recurring and unsettling trend in the accounts of people being abducted by supernatural beings from their beds, cars, and peaceful forest pathways. As mentioned before, those who claim to have been abducted often exhibit symptoms that are eerily similar to those of others who have experienced demonic oppression. Paralysis, inability to cry out or move, and an overpowering sensation of dread and panic are all experienced by victims of demonic attack and alien abduction alike. They talk about lost time, experiences that seem both real and dreamlike, and a sense of being mistreated by forces they can neither comprehend nor fight. People who have experienced such spiritual assaults describe being unable to move or talk, as well as intense fear that goes beyond normal apprehension or trepidation. The similarities are too obvious to ignore. Another aspect that connects these two occurrences is that the manipulation and deception. Many abductees report feeling duped or manipulated by the aliens they interact with. In John 8:43 through 45, Satan is called the father of lies. Actually, we read that verse earlier. Another place where the distinction between the extraterrestrials and demonic dissolves is the physical and spiritual anguish that accompanies these abductions. Physical aches, nightmares, and persistent feeling of spiritual disturbance that follows them long after contact are all described by abductees. Demonic oppression victims frequently speak of a long-lasting bodily and spiritual ramifications, which is evidence of the significant influence these experiences can have. The well-known UFO researcher Jacques Vallée, who we'll describe here in just a few, offers a fascinating viewpoint on these linkages in his book Passport to Magonia, From Folklore to Flying Saucers in 1969. Vallée examines the connections between contemporary UFO sightings and past claims of encounters with extraterrestrial life. His comparisons bring out the spiritual aspects of the situation even more, connecting the modern and the mystical. Both alien abductions and demonic oppression involve deception, manipulation, and fear. This points to a fight that goes beyond the physical. The overlapping of these two events calls into question the conventional view of alien encounters and encourages us to view these encounters as representatives or representations of an invisible spiritual conflict rather than merely a physical contact with extraterrestrial beings. In fact, we might be more accurate by calling them interdimensional instead of extraterrestrial. This is perfectly in line with what the Bible teaches about fallen entities. Okay, so we'll read a few more things that appear in the book here that Father Spyridon specifically brings up. But he says here, again, the guy that got pushed over. In a later book, Good details the effects of a different witness who is told by the beings that he would suffer a heart attack. Bobby was affected deeply by his experiences. Sometime in the spring of 1963, he indeed did suffer a heart attack. Although no further contacts ensued, he told me that from the end of 1962 to July 1964, the extraterrestrials communicated with him by means of images projected on the mirror of his room in the house of Benchenham. The images seemed to be generated by or projected from a red light in the sky. Within a circular image of about 1 foot in diameter, a face was seen and a voice heard. The discourses were mainly philosophical. Bobby believed that most people who have the rare privilege of witnessing strange beings or visions from other planets suffer from depression. Others can be driven to the point of madness and potentially suicide. So that doesn't sound like a benevolent encounter. It doesn't sound like the aliens are helping us become more than we already are. And I want to make a point, again, related to Lucifer and the light bringer. Notice how, again, these lights in the sky, I can't help but connect the dot that, again, it's a false light. It's a false light of deception, leading people further and further down a very dark pathway. So he says the sinister trend that Good refers to reflects a common perception amongst many observers. Christopher Bader, writing about the UFO contact movement in the USA, notes that the first claims of extended contact with alien beings in the early 1950s were entirely different in form and content from the current frightening UFO abduction tales. So they're changing over time. Very interesting. Just as individual contactees often describe an increasingly threatening and disturbing nature as multiple encounters are experienced, so too the collective experience of these events has become overall more negative. It was in the 1960s that contactees started to report aggressive aliens who forced their victims to accept medical procedures. Well, we witnessed that in 2020. Witnesses of this kind began to be called abductees. Bader summarizes the common features of such experiences as follows. In a prototypical UFO abduction account, the victim or victims sees a strange object far away in the sky. The object comes closer and closer. Suddenly, the person blacks out or has no recall of the following events. The next thing that the person remembers is looking at a clock and realizing that a couple of hours have passed that cannot be accounted for. Troubled by this memory gap or missing time, as it is called in UFO circles, the victim may undergo hypnosis or other therapies to attempt to remember this period of time. While under hypnosis, the victim recalls that strange alien beings took him or her aboard their ship. submitting him or her to an exhaustive and often painful physical examination. The victim is then released with little or no memory of the event. Most UFO abduction researchers believe that the aliens somehow erased the victim's memory of the abduction. And then he goes on to describe another description of an event. There's one that is actually pretty interesting. It may have been earlier in the book, where a guy, this was in Britain, I believe, he claimed to have been a UFO abductee. And this is getting into the way in which they sort of harass the person and minimize the person. Apparently, the aliens asked him what time it was, of which he said 2:30, which was the time that he thought it was. Apparently, 2 hours had passed. And they go, and they're like, "No, you idiot, it's 4:30." And basically insinuating you don't know anything. And one highlighted that it could be a comment on, oh, let me see. I think I found it right here. No, maybe no, it must have been in a different chapter. I don't see it. But anyways, it must have been a comment potentially on time itself, right? That the aliens were insinuating that maybe time isn't what he thought it was. And I think it's in the Jacques Vallée chapter, actually. So we may get to it. I may be able to read it here. And so in the past few decades, many abductees have claimed to have suffered intrusive procedures, Father Spyridon says, that have seemed sexual in nature. David Jacobs, associate professor of history at Temple University, supports Hopkins' idea and says, no matter how they handle the experience, all abductees have one thing in common. They are victims. Just as surely as women who are raped are victims of sexual abuse, or soldiers can be victims of post-traumatic stress disorder, abductees are victims who require sensitivity and, if needed, help in understanding what has happened to them and the possible consequences that abductions have had for their lives. So he goes on to talk about how many people are traumatized years after their encounters, and that, again, it's growing more and more negative. Here he's talking a little bit about the New Age religion. And so he says, he also notes, this is talking about Christopher Bader, describes how accounts of both abductees and ritual abuse survivors exhibited a striking similar combination of the quasi-religious and psychotherapeutic elements. He also notes that in both cases, the victims are predominantly female. I love this. Listen to this. 63% are white, upper-class women who are highly educated. This was one of the most fascinating things I saw. I'm going to read this whole thing to you guys. The majority of women, or majority of abductees, are 63% white women that are highly educated. Okay, I'll read. He also notes that in both cases, and either the victim or someone close to them will have been involved in what he describes as a New Age religion or activities linked to such as astrology. Bader also observes that victims of both experiences often exhibit similar distrust of revealing what has happened to them. Ritual abuse victims because they fear reprisal from the cult, and abductees because they often believe a conspiracy involving the government is suppressing information about UFOs. Despite the popular myth that abductees are uneducated or simple country folk, not the case. Bader discovered that those he was able to question through support groups, 63% of those claiming to be abductees are college-educated women. He says, the author had a strong impression from reading the personal stories of abductees and ritual abuse survivors, viewing their documentaries and attending their meetings, that their ranks were primarily composed of highly educated white females. The survey findings merely confirm that impression. He found that on average, abductees claimed to have been visited 10 times, and though he recognized that support groups used to consider what the aliens had done to them as akin to rape, many were now trying to find a way to understand their experience in a positive way. Despite this, however, many find their marital and employment circumstances disrupted because of feelings of victimhood, suspicion, and an obsession with conspiracy theories. From a secular therapeutic perspective, it makes sense that it is the personality type that should lead to the claims of these kinds of experiences. but we must also acknowledge that deeply traumatic events will result in similar effects on people's personalities, and that dismissal of these kinds of claims, however fantastical they may appear, may be to miss some underlying reality that may not be explained either by visitors or from outer space or an overactive imagination. Bader himself acknowledges how committed the victims are to their claims and how deeply their stories have become rooted in their lives. The level of psychological disturbance alone would indicate something has happened to them. As we shall see, the church fathers reveal us the answer is neither psychological nor extraterrestrial, but it's spiritual. And so that concludes chapter 10. Now let's move into chapter 11. Isn't that hilarious that it's majority 63%? 63%. It's highly educated white women who are getting abducted by UFOs. Find that very interesting. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts in the chat are about that. So chapter 11 is about Jacques Vallée and his theory of the interdimensionality of these entities. And so let me bring up Jacques Vallée again. Here's another one. This was actually, I'm not going to read this because I got to share this article with you though. This is a really good article connecting aliens with vampires and demons. Again, it's a bit of a long one, but I'm going to share this with you guys. It's too much for me to read on the stream, but I want to share that with you guys. So in case you want to check it out, at least pull it up as a tab on your browser and you can check it out later. Prism says UFOs are white supremes. 50 Majority says 50 Shades of Faking. Oh, too much Prozac. Oh man. Yoga moms. Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, more white women are involved. That's a great point, Michelle. Again, because yoga was one of the esoteric practices that could potentially bring contact closer to you. So very interesting stuff. Victor Black says white women are so powerful. They have all the powers men do in Western cultures. Karen's getting abducted. Oh gosh, you guys are hilarious. Okay, chapter 11 is Jacques Vallée. So I shared that link with you guys. Close encounter. Here's Jacques Vallée. Again, he is an internet. He's actually still alive. I believe he lives in San Francisco. Yeah. Is an internet pioneer, computer scientist, venture capitalist, and author, ufologist, and astronomer currently residing in San Francisco, California, and Paris, France. Here we go. Vallée is also an important figure in the study of unidentified flying objects, UFOs, and unidentified anomalous phenomenon, UAPs. Vallée was first noted for his defense of the scientific legitimacy of the extraterrestrial hypothesis and later for promoting the interdimensional hypothesis. So the reason why Father Spyridon has a whole chapter dedicated to him was regarding his interdimensionality hypothesis. And so here's the paragraph where he discusses this. Vallée's technical expertise enabled him to write about UFOs in a way that convinced many other scientists of the legitimacy of the subject. At first, he supported the conventional idea that UFOs were visitors from other planets. What is known as the extraterrestrial hypothesis. But as his research continued, Vallée began to question how far this explanation could account for the various UFO phenomena that were being reported. By 1969, he had become convinced that something very different was happening, what he called the multidimensional visitation hypothesis. Vallée had come to recognize that the behavior of UFOs, the way they appear and disappear, the speed and changes in direction, and the changes in their shape and size could not be explained by the theory that the aliens simply possess technology that is more advanced than our own. He proposed that UFOs were evidence of beings that exist beyond time and space, allowing them to be amongst us at any moment of their choosing. Now, he goes on to criticize Vallée because he never, even though he's so close to our general premise of them being spiritual entities, i.e. demons, he never goes that far. And so we'll find some quotes here. So here's a quote of Vallée from his book Dimensions. Although I'm not among those who believe that UFOs are real physical objects, I do not think they are extraterrestrial in the ordinary sense of the term. In my view, they present an exciting challenge to our concept of reality itself. Now, this reality was part of a sort of quantum mechanical worldview. In my view, this is Vallée, the widespread belief among researchers of the field in the literal truth of the abductions is only a very crude approximation of a much more complex tapestry. Another reality is involved here, a reality characterized by cosmic seduction, strange signs in heaven, and paranormal events that present a rich panoply of psychic phenomenon. So, again, Father Spyridon goes on to begin to criticize, even though we agree with that. Again, so the next page is about the ET phenomenon. Okay, so Vallée, this is Father Spyridon, recognizes that modern man is living through a time in which a new form of folklore is developing around UFOs, one that he believes is a mistaken about the true nature of UFOs, as he believes were the old traditions of the church. So he's very critical of Vallée because Vallée is not supportive of Christianity. He's certainly not supportive of the traditional church. And he says, from a Christian perspective, we can see that both his own conclusions and those of the typical UFO believer are simply two sides of the same error. One based in the assumption that a modern perspective must somehow be closer to the truth than those of the past, but he is correct in recognizing the importance of what is happening. As he states, this is not simply a case of a few tales relating encounters between a few humans and strange creatures from the sky. The UFO is an age-old and worldwide myth that has shaped our belief structures, our scientific expectations, and our view of ourselves. And so, again, he goes on to criticize his animosity towards the Christian church, and that he believes, so here, this is a quote from Vallée, during the 1970s, the report of paranormal events in connection with those close encounters with UFOs seems to become the rule rather than the exception. And most investigators have found it very difficult to deal with this aspect of the cases because it does not match their expectation of what an extraterrestrial visit would be. Oh, here's the quote that I wanted to say. Yeah, it's in the Vallée chapter. So Vallée reveals, this is Father Spyridon, a lack of consistency in his approach when he states that such absurdities are to be interpreted as symbolic rather than literal. The exact opposite, he goes how he argues Orthodox theology should be understood. He insists that when a witness meets a UFO occupant who asks, "What time is it?" and replies, "It's 2:30, only to be bluntly told, "You lie, it's 4 o'clock." This actually happened in France in 1954. The story is not simply absurd, it's a symbolic meaning beyond the apparent contradiction of dialogue. Could it be that the true meaning of the dialogue is that time is not what you think it is, or any measure of time can only be relative? So again, Father Spyridon goes on. We're going to skip the rest of it. He's just criticizing Vallée's animosity towards Christianity, even though he's so close to our own understanding. And chapter 12, we may skip this because he just goes further into the interdimensional beings theory. Here, he says at one point, this is chapter 12. Sorry about it kind of reiterates something that we've already said. So he says, I propose to define consciousness, this is Vallée, as the process by which informational associations are retrieved and traversed. The illusion of time and space would be merely a side effect of consciousness as it traverses associations, and such a theory, apparently paranormal phenomenon like remote viewing and precognition, would be expected, even common, and UFOs would lose much of their bizarre quality. So he's highlighting that Vallée and others like Stephen Greer kind of fall into this new age human potential movement, and that UFOs, whether, again, they're interdimensional beings or symbols, as he says, that they're leading towards an expansion of human consciousness, which is part of the evolutionary scheme. So that kind of sums up. And chapter 12 isn't that long, so let's just skip to chapter 13 here. Chapter 13 is on Stephen Greer. So Stephen Greer and disclosure. Okay, so who's Stephen Greer? We brought him up. He's a retired physician. He founded the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and the Disclosure Project, which seeks to disclose the disclosure of alleged classified UFO information. And as I highlighted earlier, he is trained in transcendental meditation and teaches classes on how one can contact these alien entities through getting into altered states of consciousness. Greer founded the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence in 1990 to create a diplomatic and research-based initiative to contact extraterrestrial civilizations. The group defined CE5, or Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, as human-initiated contact and communication with extraterrestrial life. You see, now we're trying to make it happen. CSETI claims to have over 3,000 confirmed reports of UFO sightings by pilots and over 4,000 of what they describe as landing traces. The organization utilizes rapid mobilization investigation teams with the aim of arriving at landing sites as quickly as possible. CSETI has defined a protocol for human-initiated contact to UFOs using consciousness. In 1993, Greer founded the Disclosure Project, the goal of which is to publicly disclose the government's alleged knowledge of UFOs, extraterrestrial intelligence, and advanced energy and propulsion systems. Greer describes the Disclosure Project as an effort to grant amnesty to government whistleblowers while willing to violate their security oaths by sharing classified information. Okay. So this is Stephen Greer, and this is what most of chapter 13 is all about. And so he highlights, let's see here. Stephen, again, kind of what we reread already. His intention, Stephen Greer's intention from the very beginning, was to add to the pressure on governments to reveal what he believed was the secret evidence about aliens and their technology. Greer claims that from the very beginning of his work, he was advising the Clinton administration about UFOs. And it is this link with government officials that he has always used as a means of claiming credibility for his statements. Of course, Greer does not question to what extent he himself may be being used as a means of spreading disinformation by the government. A key reason Greer believes that he is the one unearthing truth rather than serving as a mouthpiece for some of the agency's psychological operations is the occasions he requested congressional hearings but was refused. He is so convinced in the importance of his discoveries that such denials become from him unquestionable evidence for a cover-up rather than indications that government officials may not be taking him as seriously as he believes. And so he talked about, apparently Stephen Greer has a new documentary on Netflix called Unacknowledged. And Father Spyridon's talking about that. And apparently he watched it. He's talking about different episodes and what it's talking about. Here's an interesting one about some of the false claims that Stephen Greer has made. Here's one. So there is a clear case of him choosing to misrepresent the truth in order to support his case. In Unacknowledged, the documentary on Netflix, Buzz Aldrin is presented as claiming to believe in an alien object on one of Mars's moons, Phobos. In the film, he is shown saying there's a monolith, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once every 7 hours. They're going to say, who put it there? Who put it there? This version of the question clearly implies that it was aliens who put it there. However, Greer has misled his audience. And the full unedited statement, Aldrin is saying something not only different, but is in fact making the exact opposite point. So after he says, who put it there? Who put it there? Well, the universe put it there. If you choose, God put it there. That's actually what Buzz Aldrin said. If Greer truly believed in the reality of aliens and the reliability of his witnesses, we might ask, why would he manipulate a statement this way? And he goes on to talk about the photos of Phobos, and this monolith is clearly a natural structure on this moon. And it's certainly not man-made. It doesn't display any patterns of being man-made. He says Greer's philosophy has become mixed with many occult and esoteric ideas, but at the heart of his teaching is a utopian materialism. No surprise there. It is the belief in the potential for the creation of a society where peace reigns and humanity is free to explore the cosmos. He says that government agencies possess fully operational anti-gravity propulsion devices and new energy generation systems that, if declassified and put to peaceful uses, would empower a new human civilization without want, poverty, or environmental damage. So the government's hiding UFOs and all the technology as well. Greer claims that his new cosmology adds to our understanding of God. Oh, really? But simply because he uses the same word, we must not imagine he is talking about the same God. Greer recognizes that there are non-physical spiritual beings at work in the universe, what he calls astral beings, and argues that they have been misunderstood to be angels or demons, and even aliens too. This is why he thinks UFO researchers have struggled to explain the phenomenon, because their cosmology doesn't include both biological and non-biological beings that are visiting us. While wanting to insist that aliens are real, he acknowledged that in many cases the alien stories do not explain the event, but instead the questioning whether UFOs really do come from other planets. He has created a cosmology to incorporate multiple types of beings. In the 10th of April in 2021, Greer warned of an impending change in the U.S. government's stance on UFOs, claiming that aliens will be declared a global threat to humanity and that this will enable an even greater secrecy to be imposed. However, this, he warns, is leading to a hoax alien event that will use Project Bluebeam, which is very possible, as a means of creating holographic images to mislead us. While it is possible that governments could use such technology in this way, we must remember that the success of such a hoax is dependent on the public belief in UFOs, belief that he himself has been instrumental in fostering. And so I think he has a few more paragraphs, and that kind of concludes that chapter. So, and then we get to chapter 14, which is on Carl Gustav Jung. So let me put that in there. Chapter 14. Oh, that was chapter 13. I had the chapter wrong. I apologize, guys. Carl Jung. So now we get into chapter 14, and I have a list of Carl Jung on UFOs so you guys can see. We can kind of summarize this chapter fairly quickly. It's a good chapter, and it talks about Jung's interest in the occult. Obviously, anybody familiar with him knows that Jung was a self-proclaimed Gnostic towards the end of his life, very much interested in alchemy, Eastern mysticism, and occult magic. And so, with no surprise, his approach to UFOs, Jung viewed UFOs as a modern myth, a collective expression of humanity's deep-seated fears and anxieties. He believed that UFOs represented a psychological projection of modern people's concerns, a manifestation of their collective unconscious. According to Jung, UFOs symbolize the unknown, the unexplored, and the uncontrollable, which can evoke feelings of fear, awe, and wonder. Jung's concept of archetypes and the collective unconscious played a crucial role in his understandings of UFOs. He believed that archetypes are universal symbols, images that reside in the collective unconscious, shared across cultures and time. UFOs, in Jung's view, can be seen as a manifestation of these archetypes, representing the collective unconscious attempt to express itself through the conscious mind. And so, again, we already highlighted modern myth, collective expression of humanity's deep-seated fears and anxieties. Jung believed that UFOs represent a psychological projection of modern man's concerns, a manifestation of his collective unconscious. Archetypes of the collective unconscious play a crucial role in Jung's understanding of UFOs, symbolizing the unknown, the unexplored, and the uncontrollable. Jung's work on UFOs highlights the psychological significance of this phenomenon, revealing deep-seated fears, desires, and anxieties. Okay. Well, and one of the things that Father Spyridon highlights is that Jung did make points at certain times that the psychological explanation can't fully account for some of the physical dimensions of it. But Father Spyridon gets into his interest in like Eastern symbols, the disc as a symbol of the circle, and unpacking Jung's understanding of what that means. Jung's interest, this is Father Spyridon. Jung's interest in UFOs sits alongside his fascination with a number of occult and paranormal phenomenon, an interest which grew after he had a near-death experience. He grew up in a household where his mother practiced mediumship and spoke in tongues, and his grandfather learned Hebrew because he believed that it was the language spoken in heaven. Perhaps not surprisingly, coming from such an intensely charged environment, Jung wrote a number of scientific treatises on astrology, spiritualism, and parapsychology. He gave lectures insisting that scientists recognize the limits of their research and knowledge, and when Freud advised him to guard his interest from the public for fear of destroying his reputation, he responded, "There are strange and wondrous things in the lands of darkness. Please don't worry about my wanderings in these infinitudes. I shall return laden with rich booty for our knowledge of the human psyche. For a while longer, I will intoxicate myself on magic perfumes in order to fathom these secrets that lie hidden in the abyss of the unconscious." Okay. And yeah, so you get it. And he advises that Orthodox Christians do not subscribe to Jungian psychology, as he says it is spiritually dangerous. And now we'll move to the next chapter, chapter 15, occultism, the Vatican and alien saviors. So let me pull that one up. 15, chapter 15, occultism, the Vatican, and alien saviors. Okay, so now we're in chapter 15, and I do have a couple articles I want to show you guys. First one is this one right here. So Father Spyridon gets into the Vatican and the Catholic Church's keen interest in UFOs and aliens. This is an article I found from this year, or no, when was this one's from this year? No, when was it? Okay, maybe it's a different article. I don't have it. Anyways, this is from 2008, but this is funny. Vatican scientist says belief in God and aliens is okay. Great. Vatican's chief astronomer says that there is no conflict with believing in God and the possibility of extraterrestrial brothers, perhaps more evolved than humans. Oh, so they believe in Darwinian theory of evolution. How can we exclude that life has developed elsewhere? He told the Vatican newspaper in an interview in its Wednesday edition, explaining that the large number of galaxies with our own planets made it this possible. So, okay. Just as there is a multiplicity of creatures on Earth, there can be other beings, even intelligent, created by God. This is not in contrast with our faith because we can't put limits on God's creative freedom, he said. Why can't we speak of brothers extraterrestrial? It would still be part of creation, he said. Now, here's an interesting one. Vatican astronomer says if aliens exist, they may not need redemption. If aliens exist, they may be different from that, does not need Christ's redemption, the Vatican chief astronomer says. Jesuit father, no surprise there, Jose Funes, director of the Vatican Observatory, says Christians should consider alien life as an extraterrestrial brother and part of God's creation. Where was the... Asked about the implication of the discovery of alien life might pose for Christian redemption, Father Funes cited the gospel parable of the shepherd who left his flock of 99 sheep in order to search for the one that was lost. We who belong to the human race could easily be the lost sheep, the sinners who need a pastor, he said. God became a man in Jesus in order to save us. So if there are also other intelligent beings, it's not a given that they need redemption. They may have remained in full friendship with their creator, he said. Oh, that's so sweet. That is so sweet. What a good guy. Okay, so we'll get into what Father Spyridon talks about. Again, kind of rehashing things that we've already talked about, occultism, some of the negative attributes. I want to get to where he talks about the Vatican. Let me see here. So he's talking about New Age philosophy, that, again, certain Christian groups are accommodating this within their worldview. Here we go. Some contemporary Catholic theologians are now challenging the idea that belief in extraterrestrials is in any way contradictory to faith in God. On the contrary, they claim their faith only confirms that God has not limited life to Earth, but has spread it throughout the cosmos. The Vatican has been keen to promote itself as being at the forefront of astronomy and other sciences, maintaining several major astronomical observatories and a large number of radio telescopes. One of the Vatican's leading exorcists and close friend of Pope John Paul II, Monsignor Corrado Balducci, observed that the existence of these beings is real. We can't have doubts. Balducci also told reporters on a number of occasions that there has already been contact between humans and extraterrestrials. And he says he shouldn't be considered a rogue voice within the Vatican. Vatican astronomer Guy Consolamongo declared that the Roman Catholic Church believed humanity would discover intelligent life beyond Earth. When questions were raised about this, the Vatican's chief astronomer, Father Jose Gabriel Funes, who we just read, in 2008 assured the laity that belief in extraterrestrial life does not contradict the Christian faith. It's almost impossible to imagine that those working in such high-profile positions in the Vatican could make such statements without receiving official approval. And then he goes on to quote Pope Francis on the topic. This was confirmed when Pope Francis said, quote, "He created beings and allowed them to develop according to their internal laws that he gave to each one so that they were able to develop and arrive at their fullness of being." So an evolutionary theory. He gave autonomy to the beings of the universe at the same time at which he assured them his continuous presence, giving beings to every reality. In the same speech, the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, Pope Francis said that not only would alien visitors be welcome in the Roman Catholic churches, but he would seek to have them baptized. Such endorsements make many assumptions, not least of which is that science is capable of understanding and explaining the UFO phenomenon. Amongst UFO researchers, such statements are seen as a sign that the establishment, church, government, and military knows more than it is admitting, and that is slowly preparing the public for the moment of full disclosure. UFOs are a sign of a post-Christian age that Western culture has entered. The new religious consciousness embraces Eastern cults and is no more than superstition. The UFO fits easily into this. Roman Catholic theologians have a long history of following wherever the science leads them, even spawning a new branch of their thinking called exotheology, the theology of outer space. This is in keeping with the heretical visionary Emanuel Swedenborg, who taught that the universality of the church is inclusive of other life forms, and that union with Christ does not in any way require actual faith in him. Interesting. And so then he goes on to talk about research in Korea. Again, Jacques Vallée's book, Dimensions, Bob Lazar's accounts of unknown energy sources. Everybody's seen Bob Lazar's interviews, right? So he talks a little bit about this has long been a feature of UFO belief from Bob Lazar's accounts of unknown energy sources observed, as he says, while working at Area 51, to Stephen Greer's claims that governments are concealing the gift of free energy in order to protect the interest of fossil fuel companies. These ideas are really a result in the belief in evolution. Extraterrestrials are not only believed to be more technologically advanced, but are seen as being highly developed beyond the limitations of mankind. The materialism and atheism that invest all hope in the physical sciences has developed a fantasy about how the inventive capacity of intelligent life can solve all questions, even those that do not have a scientific answer. Spiritual evolution is assumed to parallel technological advancement. And since UFO researchers believe that alien life may have had a head start of millions of years on the evolution life on Earth, it follows that they should be imbued with the wisdom so often lacking in mankind. Again, I was highlighting that ontological distinction of how superior the entities are. Now, chapter 16, he begins to get into science fiction. And this is where our brother, man, I forgot to change the chapter again. I apologize, guys. That was 15, not 14. And this is on science fiction. This is where our good brother Jay Dyer is mentioned multiple times by Father Spyridon, clearly quoting, citing from his book. Let me pull it up, which ones he cites. He may cite from both of them. The Esoteric Hollywood, Sex, Cults, and Symbols in Film. Looks like he may be referencing both of them. So shout out to Jay Dyer, Father Spyridon, giving him a nice shout out in his chapter. So he talks about Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Again, we've actually talked about Mary Shelley and whether her husband actually wrote that book, Frankenstein. They were involved in weird sexual orgies in Switzerland, which is where the book was written. That was on an older stream. I forget what the title was. He talks about Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne, created stories that encapsulate many of the themes we see in all of science fiction that was to follow. And in 1864, he published Journey to the Center of the Earth, one of the early science fiction books to influence our understanding of aliens. Then he goes into H.G. Wells, War of the Worlds, The Time Machine, that type of stuff. Even refers Edgar Allan Poe had one called The Unparalleled Adventures of Hans Potful or Poffel, and it describes a trip to the moon. And as in the 20th century moved on, science fiction writers began to include themes of alienation and position their characters as appearing isolated within strange cultures and environments. In the late 1930s, a group of science fiction writers emerged known as the Futurians, which included names such as Isaac Asimov, Damon Knight, Donald A. Wollheim, and Frederick Pohl and James Blish. Their goal was to celebrate the achievements of science and to promote the sense of progress that science promised. Famously, in 1948, George Orwell published 1984 as a subgenre, appearing as a warning of potential enslavement by a totalitarian political system. And then so he talks about how science fiction really got going after World War II, and that the United States and British governments invited science fiction writers to suggest new ideas for technology, of which they would send over to, they would pretend that it was a message during World War II to confuse the Germans, that they had more advanced technology than they actually had. Then he starts getting into the Space Odyssey, and Kubrick's comments about machine entities is worthy of note. Both he and Arthur C. Clarke, expresses ideas about artificial intelligence eventually assuming the place of God. In 2001, we see how computer system recognizing the human crew members as a threat to its objective and utterly expendable, an idea taken even further in the Terminator movies. And Clarke, in his story, The Final Query, explored this theme further, stating that the idea that man's purpose may be to create God in the form of a super efficient computer. At the heart of both of this idea and Kubrick's notion of aliens evolving into limitless intelligences as the real deity of this cosmos is advanced intelligence and nothing more. Clarke stated this quite openly in his sequel 3001, The Final Odyssey, where God is discovered to be an ancient AI system that was created the world and man himself. And so then he starts getting into Spielberg's movies. This is where he gives Jay Dyer a shout out. He says, Jay Dyer proposes that this may be an indication of wider themes, once more pointing to the Marxist theory of alienation. The alien in E.T. possesses magic powers and is able to levitate objects in himself at key moments of the film, places his glowing finger on the boy's forehead, which in Hindu texts is the location of the third eye. Spielberg even endows the alien with the power of resurrection, presented in a sentimental moment when the boy's love for him starts his heart up again. The aliens of Close Encounters also possess occult powers, transmitting telepathic images to those they have contact in order to draw them to their meeting place. Again, logismy, the imagination, the spiritual realm in which we are contacted by these entities, right? Only those courageous enough to answer the call will be rewarded with the revelation of the mothership as the film's climax. And so, again, he talks a little bit about these movies moving forward, gives Father Seraphim a shout out in Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future, and provides more references to Dyer. So that concludes chapter 16. And then this is the chapter we've all been waiting for, chapter 17, the truth behind the deception. This is when he starts to get into the Orthodox take, and I'll try to read many of the quotes he uses from the church fathers. So this is where he's already hinting throughout the book that it's demons, obviously, right? But in 17, this is where he finally talks about it. And let's see, where's the first one? So he reads what we read in Ephesians 2 about the powers of the air. He's laying out that where exactly the demons and Satan resides from an Orthodox worldview is in the air. And he says, today we might add to Blessed Augustine's comment that they exceed the capabilities of fighter jets, the ability to transform themselves. Oh, so let me read this quote from Augustine. So in reference to the prince of the air, Satan and the demons, he says, this is St. Augustine, the nature of demons is such that through the sense perception belonging to the aerial body, they readily surpass the perception possessed by earthly bodies. And in speed too, because of the superior mobility of the aerial realm, they incomparably excel not only the movements of men and of beasts, but even the flight of birds. Today, we might add to Blessed Augustine's comment that they exceed the capabilities of fighter jets. The ability to transform themselves is also confirmed in St. Paul's second letter to the Corinthians when he says Satan is transformed into an angel of light and his ministers as the servants of righteousness. Glowing lights in the sky that move at impressive speeds are clearly something demons can become, but this still leaves the question of radar signals and physical impressions left on the ground and on people. And so now he starts to quote various church fathers and saints and says, as a result of the fall, our human bodies and their senses have lost the capacity to perceive the spiritual reality in which we are created. St. Ignatius Brian Chananov writes, this is the condition of darkness by reason of their extreme crudeness and coarseness. The bodily senses are incapable of communion with spirits. They do not see them. They do not hear them. They do not sense them. Thus, the blunted axe is no longer capable of being used according to its purpose. The Holy Spirits avoid communion, while the fallen spirits who have drawn us into their fall have mingled with us, and as the more easily to hold us in their captivity. Then he talks about Satan falling from heaven from the book of Revelation. Again, further reference to Ephesians, our fight is not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against wicked rulers of the darkness, against spirits and their wickedness under the heavens, again, highlighting that they're above us. St. John Chrysostom wrote a commentary on the epistles to the Ephesians and explaining the quotation above, wrote, here again, the Apostle Paul means that Satan occupies the space under heaven and that the incorporeal powers are spirits of the air under his operation. Speaking about the journey of the soul after death, St. John also writes that we will need protection from our guardian angel against the invisible dignities and powers and world rulers of this air who are called persecutors. St. Athanasius warned that, quote, the devil, the enemy of our race, having fallen from heaven, wanders about our lower atmosphere, and there bearing rule over his fellow spirits. In the same work, St. Athanasius describes their activity in the lower atmosphere. He says they work illusions, and that Christ came to clear the air and prepare the way for us to him. Christ's death on the cross was in the very air where demons are present. He was lifted up to confront and abolish the fruit of their work, which is death. St. Athanasius writes, our Lord Jesus Christ, who took upon him to die for all, stretched forth his hands, not somewhere on the earth beneath, but in the air itself, destroying the devil who is working in the air. A quote from St. John Cassian, writing at the beginning of the 5th century, says, "This air, which is spread out between heaven and earth, is so thick with spirits, which do not fly about in it quietly and aimlessly." Another quote from St. Macarius the Great of Egypt in the 4th century presents us with a sobering warning. "There are rivers of dragons and mouths of lions, and the dark forces under the heavens, and fire that burns and crackles in all the members, such that the earth could never contain." Another one from St. Nicodemus of the Holy Mountain, best known for his work of compiling the Filiocalia. Reflecting on the expectation of those who have been obedient to Christ, he wrote, "When our soul departs from us, it will fly like a dove in freedom and joy into the heavens, without being inhabited whatsoever by the spirits lurking in the air." Higher martyr Daniel of Moscow states clearly that above the earth is the kingdom of Satan. Above the earth is the realm of the spirits. Beneath the heavens, a place where the devil rules. Sacred scripture speaks frankly about this, calling it spiritual wickedness in high places. Metropolitan Hierotheos Vlachos once more confirms this teaching. He writes, "The devil is characterized as the prince of the power of the air because he is in the atmosphere and is constantly waging war on men." Archimandrite Pantaleimon, who founded the monastery of Holy Trinity, Jordanville, here in the United States, and served there as abbot, describing our journey after death, states, "The powers of darkness have established particular seats of judgment and particular watches, and through these the soul passes and are tried during the rise through the air. Throughout the space between earth and heaven, there watchfully stand contingents of the fallen spirits." St. Seraphim, St. Herman of Alaska, also declaring this teaching, he writes, "Although we do not have such grace as the apostles had, still our wrestling is against the same fleshless principalities and powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against the spirits of evil under heaven, who strive to intercept and hold and prevent all travelers toward our heavenly Father." Let's see. Then he's talking about various akathis, various points in which the Prince of the Air is made reference in liturgy. Then he talks about Saint Theophan the Recluse tells us, "Physical evidence reveals nothing in the atmosphere except for air with some incidental strata of other atmospheric bodies, while divine revelation states this is the area of the aerial powers, of the spiritual wickedness in high places, who sleep neither day nor night in their effort to harm us. The demons encountered in the course of our lives hide in secret, like a beast waiting to catch its prey, attacking the soul suddenly." And then this is, I'll conclude with this, because he tells the Orthodox Christian, I believe maybe it's in the conclusion, he tells us not to worry, that they cannot affect us as long as we repent and stay close to Christ. Throughout history, Christians have been very wary of any kind of strange phenomenon, knowing they were vulnerable to demonic actions. Today, even many Christians have rejected the existence of demons as something outdated and not worthy of their modern thinking, and are not only curious about strange events, they actively seek them out. It is not only Roman Catholics who are looking for life elsewhere, but Protestants too. But as Seraphim Rose reminds us, there are indeed other forms of life above us. In fact, too, angels and demons. So long as man seeks out contact with such beings without the ascetical struggles of the Orthodox Christian Church, he will only encounter demons, and they will present themselves in whatever form man's current philosophies make most acceptable. Today it is UFOs. And then he goes into chapter 18, the conclusion, and that's where I want to read his final remarks for Orthodox Christians. I think that's the best way to end. So this is where I'm going to read my last section from the book, and I'll check any super chats or anything that people have sent in here while I was going. So, and any questions, I'm curious what your guys' thoughts were on the stream tonight. Gosh, it's almost 4 hours. Holy crap. No wonder my mouth is tired of reading. This is his last thing he says. Belief in UFOs also promotes the ideas of global unity. which may have a superficial attraction. However, those seeking to globalize their interests have shown their willingness to suppress cultural diversity and force a single ethical code. For example, the European Union has repeatedly punished Poland and Hungary for their traditional stances on issues such as abortion and marriage. Like the threat of environmental disaster, anticipation of an extraterrestrial attack may result in a move to the idea of a single humanity defending itself under a single world government. This threat has been explored in numerous publications. For the Orthodox Christian, the assurance is very clear. There is nothing to fear in this phenomenon. UFOs are merely a further manifestation of demonic presence. Our task is not to engage with them or pursue them. It is to focus on the same spiritual struggles that the church has always taught us. We are not in danger. UFOs cannot harm us. As long as we confess and repent of our sins, pray, receive Holy Communion, and trust in God's love, Satan is a liar, and we must reject his deception. So that is how Father Spyridon Bailey concludes the book, The UFO Deception, an Orthodox Christian Perspective. Again, a major thank you to major thank you to AC for sponsoring today's stream. Thank you very much, brother, for the sponsorship. I think this was a great topic. Did you guys like today's stream? What are your guys' thoughts on it? I know there's a lot of reading. There's a lot of reading and everything, but curious how you guys felt about it. Okay, let me pull up some super chats real quick. Looks like we got a few that came in over on the Streamlabs. So luckily the camera is working, so I can pull those up. Let me pull them up real quick. All right, Storm the Cat. Shout out to Storm the Cat. Throws in $5 and says, there is this cryptid in Massachusetts called the Dover Demon, and its physical description sounds very similar to the so-called alien grays with a big head and large black eyes. And another cryptid in South America that also sounds kind of like that. Yeah, I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. And then UFO Schwab. I don't know who does this, but they pretend to be Klaus Schwab on different topics. I love it. UFO Schwab tipped $5 and says, you will be probed and you will be happy. Thank you. Thank you. And oh my gosh, a generous super chat just came in from Gary. Throws in $100. Thank you so much, Gary, for the $100 super chat. He says, epic stream tonight. Thank you very, very much, Gary, for that generous support. God bless you. And God bless everybody who supported tonight. Thank you guys very, very much for that. Truly, truly appreciate it. Truly do. And so let's go up here. It looks like a few came in over on the super chat. Shout out to Willie Jenkins, been a COTEL crew member for 15 months. My God, thank you so much. He says, extraterrestrials are the fallen ones bound to the earth. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Willie Jenkins, for being a member for so long. Brody Alexander, young old boy, throws in $3 Canadian and has a skillet. I think he says cooking. I'm not sure what he means. I think that's what he takes. I'll take it because that's a compliment. I'll take it that way. And then Majorian throws in $5. If we can't trust the official NASA narrative, what are stars and planets in space supposed to be? Well, actually, I have a video maybe talking a little bit about that for members coming up this week. So, Majorian, maybe you want to, for $5, become a website member and get access to a video. I was going to speculate. It's speculative theology I was going to do a video on. But thank you very much, Majorian, for the $5. Shout out to Well Emmanuel. Been a COTEL crew member for 16 months. He beat you, Willie Jenkins, by a month. Thank you so much, Well Emmanuel. He says thanks. And David Atlas throws in $10, says, excellent stream, DPH. Thank you. Well, thank you very much, David Atlas. Truly appreciate your support. God bless you. And let me check the dono chat. Guys, I got to give special thank yous to a couple people who were very generous tonight. Number one, Jonathan 2029 or John 2029. I'm sorry. Thank you very much, brother, for your support tonight. Really, really appreciate it. Another one goes out to Blue Skittle. Blue Skittle donated $100 and said, Dono Train. And Blue Skittle, thank you very, very much for your support. Thank you for that generous super chat. And that goes also to Gary. Gary threw in $100 super chat, said epic stream tonight. Thank you so much, Gary. Really appreciate that. God bless you and your family as well. Those were very generous of you guys. And last one looks like Dark Lord in a tutu throws in $5 and has a super sticker. So thank you very much, Dark Lord in a tutu, for the super sticker. And that is going to do it for me tonight. Guys, I hope again you liked it. I love the support. Thank you all so much for the generous support tonight. I truly do appreciate that. And yeah, let's see what some of the people have to say about it. The Orthodox Clown says, this stream was absolutely legendary, going over a legendary book that I believe will be talked about longer than most of us will be alive. This is one of the only books where I felt this book is like a Father Seraphim Rose book. It's literally amazing. Yeah, it's a great overview. Shout out to Mark Rotella. God bless you and the family. He says, amazing stream. Well, thank you very much, Mark. God bless you and the family. T. Sanders says, support your favorite creator. Great stream, DPH. Well, thank you very much, T. Sanders. Really appreciating that. Tommy Jones says, this is getting a replay in the work van tomorrow. Excellent stuff. Well, thank you very much, Tommy. Really appreciate that. And guys, smash that like. Thank you all so much. I truly appreciate all the support tonight. This did take a little bit of, multiple days reading through that book, getting through the research, presenting everything. And I hope it was digestible and it was interesting and it was useful. So thank you guys. And again, major thank you to everybody who supported. Major thank you to the generous super chats you guys sent me. Thank you. I love you guys. And I truly appreciate that you guys support my work as well. So thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I will be back. Let's see. Later this week, we have a think tank meeting tomorrow night, guys. So if you're a premium member or would like to join a private conversation amongst Orthodox men around the world, talking about the latest and greatest things happening, make sure you go to the website and become a premium member. We have a meeting tomorrow night at 7:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you sign up, I'll send you the link to join. And I hope you all have a blessed 4th of July. Hope nobody loses a hand from fireworks. But God bless you all. And I will see you later this week. Mela Fort, she says, DPH doesn't mess around, always quality stuff. Thank you so much, Mela. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much. And I will see you guys later this week. God bless you all and your families. And as always, until next time, God bless.